Chapter 2031, Fu Clan. A weak and helpless woman was being pursued by 10 powerful brutes. Wasn't this a typical case of kidnapping? Although the woman didn't appear too weak, with a 4th severance cultivation, the brutes chasing after her were all at the 3rd severance or 4th severance as well. As such, how could she hope to defeat them? Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his mind. As expected of the Western Celestial Realm. Even severing mundane tier cultivators are so commonplace. Anyhow, that woman was indeed beautiful, with her skin pale like jade and her hair raven black. Her figure was also extremely shapely and alluring. As such, it wouldn't have been surprising if she had caught the attention of some evil young master, who had then commanded his underlings to kidnap her. The woman continued to scream as she ran, yet the louder she screamed, the quicker the people in the surroundings tried to avoid her. They appeared extremely afraid to be caught up in her trouble. After everyone retreated to the sides of the streets, Ling Han and his companions stuck out like a sore thumb. A hint of panic spread across the woman's face. She didn't know the intention of Ling Han and the others. Were they going to help her, or were they going to assist her kidnappers? She was running extremely quickly, and she sped past Ling Han and the others in a flash. Her expression immediately relaxed, and she continued to speed away into the distance. When the dozen or so brutes approached, a faint smile spread across Ling Han's face. He activated his regulation of slaughter. Wang! A terrifying aura exploded outward, causing the color to drain from the brutes' faces. They collapsed to the ground with several loud thuds. Was it possible for severing mundane tier cultivators to fall over for no reason? Naturally not. Moreover, it was a dozen or so of them falling over in unison. It was extremely evident that this was the doing of Ling Han and the others. Otherwise, why would they be standing in the middle of the road? Heavens! They actually dare to interfere with young Master Fu's affairs. They're definitely going to suffer great misfortune. Seriously. Don't they know that the Fu clan is a powerful clan of United Link City? By the looks of it, they're all newcomers. That's definitely the case. The passers-by murmured among themselves, and they were all discussing this in a hushed tone. It was as if they were afraid of being overheard. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder these dogs were all at the severing mundane tier. If it weren't a powerful clan, how could they deploy so many powerful cultivators? However, he naturally wouldn't worry about this. To say nothing of the impressive battle prowess of himself and the others, wasn't there Xiao Gu to protect them even if they truly provoked a powerful elite? Let's go, Niu wants to eat meat. Hu Niu said in displeasure. She patted her stomach as she spoke. Let's go, Niu wants to eat meat. Xiao Gu repeated. He also started to pat his stomach. Ling Han could feel the beginning of a headache. Just Hu Niu alone was already enough trouble. Now, there was going to be another troublemaker? In any case, he naturally couldn't turn down Hu Niu's request. Thus, they started to look for a place to eat. They chit-chatted as they walked, and it was almost as if they had already forgotten about the small commotion just then. The passers-by exchanged surprised glances with each other. These people are far too confident. Indeed. They interfered with the Fu clan's matters, yet they still dare to act so calm and composed. Perhaps they came prepared? Tisk, haven't you heard of the saying? Even a powerful dragon can't defeat a snake in its nest. Don't they know that the Grand Elder of the Fu clan is the chief alchemist of the moon-plucking celestial king? Heh. In any case, they're definitely seeking death. Ling Han and the others didn't hear these remarks. This was because they had already found a restaurant, and started to chomp down on food. Delicious. Hu Niu had a drumstick in one hand and braised pork in another. Her mouth was also stuffed with food, yet she could still somehow manage to speak clearly. This was truly impressive. Xiao Gu tried to emulate her, yet his words came out completely scrambled. He couldn't speak clearly at all. It was clear that gluttons also needed talent. Ling Han, the Empress, and the others ordered some wine to drink. There were many aspects where the Western Celestial Realm was different from the Eastern Celestial Realm, and this also included the food culture. Thus, they all wanted to try some wine. "You people seem to be in quite a good mood," someone said with a leisurely laugh. Ling Han and the others looked over, only to see someone at the door. However, because the light was coming from behind him, a long shadow was cast onto the floor. This also made him appear slightly more dignified. This was a smart-looking young man. He was wearing an azure robe, and his eyebrows were slightly raised, making him appear quite flamboyant. "Young Master Fu." The customers in the restaurant immediately stood up and greeted him. Their voices were all filled with respect. The Fu clan was a formidable force in United Link City. This person was called Fu Yu, and he was the only third-generation member of the Fu clan. Thus, one could imagine just how lofty his status was. This was inevitable. The past 3 generations of the Fu clan all consisted of only a single person. Fu Yu wore a faint smile as he strode into the restaurant. He arrived beside Ling Han's table, and there was a skinny old man following behind him. This old man appeared tired and listless, and his eyes were shut the entire time. However, whenever he opened them, one could see the countless intertwining symbols on his eyeballs. His domineering aura would flash into the surroundings for a split second. Immortal Palace Tier? Ling Han speculated in his mind. This old man's power was profound and hard to fathom. He was so powerful that even Ling Han couldn't determine his power. Thus, he was at least at the Immortal Palace Tier. However, could he be an ascending origin tier elite? Ling Han truly didn't believe this. Would such an elite become the subordinate of a young man? After all, the Fu clan wasn't a celestial king tier force. "You don't mind me sitting over here, do you?" Fu Yu asked with a smile. However, he had already taken a seat before Ling Han and the others could even reply. "Why the fuck did you ask? You don't mind me sitting over here, do you?" Xiao Gu repeated. He was filled with excitement upon seeing this new toy. A look of displeasure instantly spread across Fu Yu's face. What was the meaning of this? Was this person mocking him? He humphed and said, "Friend, don't think I don't know that it was you who attacked my useless subordinates." "Friend, don't think I don't know," Xiao Gu repeated without missing a word. Moreover, his skills had clearly improved, and he could even emulate one's tone and expression now. Fu Yu truly became angry at this moment. These people were taking things too far. Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly astonished. Wasn't the Fu clan a formidable force? How did this young Master Fu have so much spare time? He had failed to kidnap a woman, so he was personally coming over now? Was he truly that given to lust? However, this didn't seem right. Whether or not one was given to lust, this could be easily determined through their actions. Right now, Hunyo, the Empress, and bewitching maiden Ro were all sitting at the table. They were 3 breathtaking beauties. However, Fu Yu could still remain undistracted. Indeed, he might steal a few glances here and there, but this was a completely normal reaction. Bam! Fu Yu slammed his hand on the table. His patience certainly wasn't great. However, this was understandable. As a respected youth, who wouldn't be afraid of him and yield to him? Moreover, he didn't know about Xiao Gu's habit of parroting others, so he thought that Xiao Gu was purposefully mocking him. As such, he naturally couldn't control his temper. "Heh, don't mind him. He simply likes to copy others," Ling Han said with a smile. "Heh, don't mind him," Xiao Gu repeated. He still liked to copy Ling Han the most. After all, this was the first person that he had met. Indeed, even his appearance was copying Ling Han's. Upon seeing this, Fu Yu's anger finally subsided a little. This person seemed to have some mental issues. Strange. One of the brothers is handsome and confident, yet the other one is stupid and slow. Was he beaten stupid in his mother's stomach? I'll also cut to the chase. Where's that woman? Fu Yu asked. Chapter 2032, Wild Imagination. That woman? Oh, the woman who was being pursued by the group of brutes? This was truly a loyal person. Was he unable to forget that woman? Ling Han shook his head and replied, I don't know what you're talking about. Friend, are you trying to deny that you attacked my subordinates just then? Fu Yu asked with a humph. A look of evident displeasure spread across his face. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, that can't be considered as attacking. If I'd truly attacked them, which of them would have survived? This was the truth. Those brutes were merely at the severing mundane tier, so with Ling Han's power as a dividing soul tier cultivator, he could have easily killed them with a single thought. Would you have dared to? Fu Yu asked. The Fu clan was a formidable force in United Link City. The Grand Elder of the Fu clan was more so the chief alchemist of the moon-plucking celestial king, so who dared to provoke the Fu clan? I won't speak any nonsense with you. Hand that woman over. Otherwise, suffer the consequences. Fu Yu's tone was extremely tough. Ling Han laughed and said, sorry, but I don't know about any woman or any man or whatever. I suggest you ask someone else. How dare you? Fu Yu roared in rage. He reached over to grab at Ling Han. Wang. Numerous symbols materialized on his hand. Golden light dazzled, and he appeared much like a divine being. Ling Han was slightly astonished. He had truly underestimated this person. Fu Yu actually possessed an earth soul battle prowess. Moreover, his cultivation level was only at the Yin soul, yet he was actually able to wield the battle prowess of an earth soul cultivator. He possessed the might of an emperor tier. Ling Han reached over to grab Fu Yu's wrist. How audacious! Fu Yu said with a cold humph. Was this person retarded? They were both at the dividing soul tier, so they could only have a rough gauge of each other's major tier. In terms of minor level, they weren't able to determine this with any confidence. Only those who were sensitive enough could determine whether one's aura was stronger or weaker than their own. If they engaged in a fight, however, they would naturally be able to determine each other's cultivation level with ease. One of them was at the Yin soul, and the other was at the Yang soul. There was only one minor level between them. Moreover, Fu Yu was also an emperor tier, so he could rival those one minor level above him and still be invincible. In other words, he could crush those at the Earth Soul. As such, how could Ling Han rival him? You're not trying to dodge, and you're even trying to grab my wrist instead. Just how audacious are you? Pa! There was a crisp crack as Fu Yu's wrist was grabbed by Ling Han. Ling Han's grip was extremely solid. What? Fu Yu was shocked, and his eyes were instantly filled with disbelief. Even the elder behind him suddenly opened his piercing eyes. It was as if celestial bodies were forming and collapsing, and this was an overwhelming aura that caused almost everyone in the restaurant to groan in pain. In fact, some people even started to cough blood. This was an Immortal Palace tier elite. Just his aura alone was already enough to severely wound severing mundane tier cultivators. Fortunately, Xiao Gu reached over to protect the Empress and the others. He had clearly blocked the attack of an Immortal Palace tier elite with ease, yet his expression was still dazed, and he appeared especially muddle-headed and adorable. Fuck! The elder's eyes widened in astonishment. Just then, he had thought that Xiao Gu was nothing more than a fool. However, this fool had actually reached the Immortal Palace tier? No, he had at least reached the Immortal Palace tier. The elder conceded that he couldn't determine Xiao Gu's cultivation level. It was unfathomably profound. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Young people need to show respect. It's not good to throw punches. We need to convince other people with reason." The Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ro, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden all smiled upon hearing this. Their husband always liked to pummel people for the smallest of conflicts. Yet, He was now encouraging someone else to convince people with reason? Wasn't this a joke? Only Hunyo chimed in with a serious expression, saying, Nyo also likes to convince people with reason. Brat, let's compete in eating. If you can't eat as much as Nyo, then crawl on the ground like a dog. Fuyu felt like his view of the world was collapsing. A young soul cultivator had managed to easily grab his wrist, and he couldn't break free from his grasp no matter what. Not only that, but his foolish brother had even managed to block the attack of his guardian. How was this group so powerful? Perhaps this was all part of an elaborate conspiracy. Perhaps their aim was to draw him out and then capture him so that they could demand a ransom from the Fu clan? What audacity! They were subordinates of the moon-plucking celestial king, and his grandfather was more so the chief alchemist. In fact, he could be viewed as a favored subordinate of the celestial king. To target the Fu clan. Wasn't this equivalent to provoking the moon-plucking celestial king? What in the world do you people want? The more danger he was in, the more composed Fu Yu became. He possessed the demeanor of an emperor tier. Ling Han was slightly surprised, and he said, You targeted me first, yet you're asking me what I want? Aren't you twisting the facts a little? Humph. Enough with the nonsense. You're after a ransom, aren't you? Fu Yu said. This. Fu Yu cut Ling Han off, and immediately said, 100 million star stones. That's enough, right? This is the final offer. Otherwise, the deal is off. Fu Yu said in a resolute voice. Ling Han was rendered speechless. He had never even thought about becoming a kidnapper. Moreover, even though he had grabbed Fu Yu's wrist, had that not been an act of self-defense? Why had the situation suddenly elevated to one of kidnapping and ransom? Moreover, it had taken this twist in such a smooth fashion. Upon seeing Ling Han's silence, Fu Yu took it as a sign of agreement. He turned to the elder and said, Uncle Yu, can you please go and bring 100 million star stones over? Young master, then what about your safety? The elder asked in concern. His task was to protect Fu Yu, yet not only had he failed, but he even had to temporarily leave? What if the other party didn't honor the deal? Rest assured, I'm confident that these people aren't fools. They understand that I'm only valuable if I'm alive, Fu Yu said in a composed voice. He appeared extremely calm and relaxed. Understood, the elder replied. Without any more hesitation, he turned around to leave. Please wait for a moment. 100 million star stones will take some time to gather, Fu Yu said. His expression was as if he were in control, even though he had fallen into their hands. Ling Han and the others exchanged confused glances, and they could all see the thought in each other's eyes. This dumb C***NT. Sigh. Ling Han loosened his grip, and said, Say, is your imagination a bit wild? Fu Yu rubbed his sore wrist, and said, Friend, you've already gained the upper hand, so is there any need to mock me? He naturally wouldn't think Ling Han was letting him go. Instead, Ling Han and the others were brimming with confidence. Even if they didn't restrict him, he still wouldn't be able to flee. Ling Han patted Fu Yu's shoulder, and said, You're definitely the most imaginative person that I've come across. Fu Yu naturally thought that Ling Han was teasing him, so he simply replied with a cold humph. Ling Han shook his head, and said, What if I told you that I don't know that woman at all? Would you believe me? You don't believe me, huh? However, this is indeed the truth. I was simply displeased with seeing so many brutes chasing a weak woman. Just then, you were also the one who attacked me first, so I was merely acting in self-defense. However, your imagination took flight, and you thought that I was kidnapping you for a ransom? Ha 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 ha. Fu Yu didn't believe Ling Han at first. Fuck. Do you think I'm stupid? He humphed, and said, Then I'm going to leave now. You won't stop me, will you? Please, Ling Han said as he pointed at the door. Fu Yu was extremely suspicious as he walked over. Upon seeing that Ling Han and the others weren't attempting to stop him, he turned around, and said, I'm really going to leave now. Please. Chapter 2033, Searching for the Culprit. Fu Yu walked out of the restaurant. However, after a brief moment, he stuck his head back in, saying, "I'm really going to leave." Ling Han nodded in reply, gesturing for him to do as he pleased. Fu Yu walked out of the restaurant again. However, after a short moment, he surprisingly entered again, walking over and sitting next to Ling Han. This was genuinely a misunderstanding, he asked in puzzlement. Ling Han and the others replied with a nod. Even though this person was an emperor tier, he was more so a clown. Fu Yu could barely believe that he had caused such a ruckus over nothing. However, he had indeed been able to leave freely just then. This was proof that Ling Han and the others hadn't been lying to him. Fuck. He had truly become a clown. His face flushed red as he sighed with embarrassment. After a long while, he said, "I might have misunderstood you guys, but this isn't without reason." He paused for a moment before continuing, "In fact, you guys also misunderstood me. I'm not someone who abuses my power to harass others." "I've gathered so," Ling Han said with a nod. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated Fu Yu with such politeness. There were far too many sinister tyrants and perverts in the world, and Ling Han wouldn't mind punishing them if he came across them. If Fu Yu had truly been such a person, he would have already been a corpse now. "That woman pretended to be a maid to enter my clan, yet she stole the undying pill that my grandfather had just finished refining. This was discovered by the other servants, and this was what led to me pursuing her. I immediately gave chase after receiving the news, but it was already too late," Fu Yu said. "Huh. So this is how it was? Is that so?" Ling Han asked with a frown. If this were true, then he had truly committed evil with good intentions. Not a word is false. "I swear on the reputation of the Fu clan," Fu Yu said with a solemn expression. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Then this was truly all a big misunderstanding." They had misunderstood why the members of the Fu clan had been pursuing the woman. Meanwhile, Fu Yu had mistakenly thought that Ling Han and the others were trying to kidnap him for a ransom. Ling Han immediately stood up, and said, "Then let's look for her. This is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Where do we even start?" Fu Yu said with a sigh. The population of United Link City numbered in the tens of billions, and this city was more so astoundingly large. Trying to find a specific person was as difficult as ascending the heavens. "Niu will look for her." Hu Niu volunteered. Fu Yu didn't feel any confidence at all. This was someone who had challenged someone else to an eating contest. What could she possibly achieve? However, Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Niu, lead the way." Hu Niu immediately stood up to leave. However, after taking a few steps, she hurriedly ran back to package all of the leftover food. Only then did she stride away. Fu Yu instantly felt even less confident. He couldn't help but shake his head. "Let's go," Ling Han said as he grabbed Fu Yu. With his strength, Fu Yu naturally couldn't resist him. They left the restaurant, and returned to where they had first encountered the woman. Hu Niu wrinkled her nose and started to sniff the surroundings. After a while, she pointed at some road, and said, "Over there." "Fuck. Do you have a dog nose?" Fu Yu couldn't help but diss in his mind. However, he naturally didn't dare to say this out aloud. Moreover, Hu Niu was so breathtakingly beautiful, so he definitely couldn't bring himself to say this. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others were filled with confidence in Hu Niu's abilities. Her nose was even more powerful than that of a dog. They continued to follow Hu Niu, who would stop from time to time before taking twists and turns, and even ascending and descending mountains. After 2 entire days, they finally arrived at a small village. There was smoke rising from chimneys, and there were dogs barking in joy. This was true countryside scenery. Hu Niu pointed at the village, and said, "Right here." "Here?" Fu Yu naturally didn't believe her. He shook his head in doubt. "Let's go," Ling Han said as he dragged Fu Yu along. They entered the village, and they were immediately surrounded by a group of children whose eyes were completely drawn to the Empress and Hunyo. They had never seen such beautiful people before. These women were completely like celestial maidens. Ling Han and the others stopped before an extremely ordinary-looking house. Here? Fu Yu asked. He couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment. He had heard from his subordinates that the woman was at the Severing Mundane tier. Even though Severing Mundane tier cultivators couldn't be regarded as elites in the celestial realm, they were still definitely respectable beings. In some small cities, they could even assemble their own forces and become a powerful ruler. As such, would they hold themselves up in such a rural place? Who would believe this? However, Ling Han turned to the children and asked, "Do any of you know who lives here? The first one to answer will get 2 pieces of candy." He immediately retrieved 2 pieces of candy. "I know. I know. I also know." The children fought to answer his question. In fact, even Hunyo felt extremely tempted. After all, this candy had initially been prepared to tempt her. A big brother and a big sister live here. The big sister is very beautiful. However, she's not as beautiful as these big sisters. They've only lived here for 2 years. The big brother got sick, and he's always coughing. In fact, I've even seen him cough blood. Ling Han smiled and took out some more candy to hand to the children. He then said, "All right, go and play now." The children immediately ran off. Ling Han pushed open the bamboo gate in front of the house, revealing a dainty path that was decorated with beautiful flowers on either side. This was in stark contrast to the simplicity of the rest of the village. Meanwhile, the door to the house was only slightly shut, and Ling Han immediately heard coughing before he had even pushed it open. With a slight push, he opened the door, revealing extremely ordinary furniture. There was only a single table, wardrobe, and bed. Lying on the bed was a man who was violently coughing. In fact, he was spitting blood as he coughed, and it was as if he were about to cough his internal organs out. "Cough. Who are you?" the man asked when he saw Ling Han. He raised his head with much difficulty, and Ling Han saw that he was a fairly handsome man. However, his face was far too pale, and there wasn't a single hint of color. Fu Yu suddenly wrinkled his nose, and exclaimed, "There's the scent of the undying pill." He immediately jumped forward, and said, "You ingested the undying pill." The man was shocked, and he hurriedly shook his head, saying, "I didn't eat any undying pill. You people have got it wrong. I don't know what you're talking about." Fu Yu's feeling of doubt vanished into thin air. Hunyo had indeed found the right place. Moreover, the undying pill had already been ingested by this man. He was filled with scorching rage. His grandfather had refined the undying pill at the command of the moon-plucking celestial king. Yet, it had been ingested by this person now. How would they explain this to the moon-plucking celestial king? "Don't worry, we don't have any evil intentions," Ling Han said with a smile. He placed a hand on the man before activating his source power of wood. A power that was brimming with vitality instantly surged into the man's body, causing his fit of coughing to immediately cease. In fact, a hint of healthy red returned to his pale face. "You've been wounded by someone," Ling Han said. "That person most likely had the ability to kill you, yet they only left you with severe wounds. Such sinister intentions. They wanted to torture you to death." The man's expression changed again and again. In the end, he could only heave a long sigh and say, "You're right. That's indeed the case." "Tell us about it," Ling Han said in interest. He had initially thought that the woman had stolen the undying pills to sell or exchange for other benefits. By the looks of it, however, that definitely wasn't the case. There were 10 undying pills in total. "You definitely haven't ingested all of them, so where are the rest of them?" Fu Yu cut in. "Oi, do you know how to speak? Can't you see that he's sick?" Ling Han said as he picked Fu Yu up and tossed him aside. He turned back to the man, and said, "All right, you can tell us now. Take it slow. Fu Yu couldn't help but feel vexed. He was the grandson of a 4-star alchemist. Was it really necessary for Ling Han to treat him like this? Chapter 2034, Story. My name is Wuming, the man said, starting to recount his story. I was born into an ordinary family, but my cultivation talent was fairly decent. Thus, I joined the Star Moon sect to cultivate. In a chance of fate, I met a person. She was Lu Shuyan, my current wife. Shuyan was the granddaughter of the third elder of the Star Moon sect, so her status was far superior to that of me, a measly outer disciple. Initially, I thought that I didn't stand a chance with Shuyan. However, who can predict fate? Yet, when Shuyan and I fell in love, we were immediately faced with strong opposition. Not only did the third elder oppose us, but the seventh elder also opposed us. The third elder wanted to win the support of the seventh elder, so he desired for both of their descendants to join together in marriage. The seventh elder had a great-grandson called Ruan Dongxia, and he already had feelings for Shuyan to begin with. With the support of his elders, he was naturally able to linger around Shuyan all the time. Shuyan pushed back against the third elder's proposal of arranged marriage several times, yet her complaints were ignored each time. At the same time, she naturally remained cold and indifferent to Ruan Dongxia. This caused Ruan Dongxia to greatly detest me, so he used his 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike to severely wound me. He wanted me to die in great agony. When Shuyan learned of this, she immediately took me with her to leave the Star Moon sect. In order to avoid capture, we carefully concealed our tracks along the way. However, upon reaching this place, my wounds had already deteriorated to an uncontrollable state. We had no choice but to stop. Upon learning that there was a skilled alchemist here, Shuyan went over to work as a maid. After toiling away for 2 years, she finally managed to sneak into the alchemy room to steal the undying pills for me. This was all because of me. Shuyan is innocent. Do whatever you want, but target me instead. Whoa, so pitiful, someone said through sobs. They looked over, only to see tears streaming down Fu Yu's face. This was a fairly exaggerated reaction. Ling Han and the others exchanged a glance. They couldn't help but think that this person was fairly sentimental and easily moved. Just then, he had still wanted to slice open this man's stomach to retrieve the undying pill. Now, however, he was sobbing uncontrollably after hearing Wuming's tragic story. Oi, your reaction is far too exaggerated, no? Ling Han said as he patted Fu Yu's shoulder. Wu. Aren't you moved? Fu Yu asked through sobs. A little bit. However, not to the same extent as you, Ling Han said. He couldn't help but shiver. Had this person reincarnated into the wrong body? How was he so sentimental and emotional? He should have reincarnated as a woman. At the very least, others most likely wouldn't find it weird if a woman were moved to tears. Woo, so pitiful. So pitiful. Fu Yu sobbed. He completely ignored Ling Han and the others. Even Wuming was rendered speechless. Even though he was the protagonist of the story, and even though he would also feel pain at times, how could a man shed tears so easily? How could they be reduced to such a state? To say nothing else, even Shuyan hadn't cried so miserably before. Oi, how long are you going to embarrass yourself for? Ling Han asked with a sigh. Don't disturb me. Let me cry for a bit longer. Hu Niu immediately lost her patience. Pa! With a kick, Fu Yu was instantly sent flying, smashing a hole into the mud and straw house. He then transformed into a small black dot that vanished into the distance. Poor child. Brother Ming, a female voice exclaimed in worry. A woman immediately rushed into the house. She was none other than Lu Shuyan, the weak woman that Ling Han and the others had encountered before. Upon seeing the people in the room, all of whom she had encountered before, the color immediately drained from Lu Shuyan's face. They had been exposed. Their victims were here to settle the debt now? This has nothing to do with Brother Ming. It was all my doing. Whatever punishment you have in mind, target me, she shouted. No, it was all because of me. Punish me. Wuming hurriedly exclaimed. It was me. No, it was me. The two of them fought to take responsibility for the crime. This was truly a moving scene. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head and say, "Are you too stupid? You still want to shoulder the responsibility alone? We're naturally going to capture both of you." No, you can't do that. Wuming and Lu Shuiyan exclaimed. They wore terrified expressions as they furiously shook their heads. Shuiyan, let's become husband and wife again in our next life. All right, Brother Ming. The lovers exchanged a glance before suddenly slapping at their own temples. They were going to shatter their own divine senses to commit suicide. Ling Han immediately reached over. Wang. A powerful force surged forth, forcefully stopping the two people's movements. Say, are you two a bit too impulsive? He said with a sigh. I never said that I would capture you. That's right, huh? Wuming and Lu Shuiyan exchanged a glance, and they could both see the lingering fear in each other's eyes. They had almost committed suicide for love. Ling Han was rendered speechless. What in the world were they feeling relieved about? If he hadn't interfered, they would have already died. Why did he always come across such people? Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, this poisonous wound. I reckon I can treat it. For real? Wuming and Lu Shuiyan exclaimed. They could barely believe what they were hearing. Ling Han nodded, and asked, that Ruan Dongxia was most likely at the dividing soul tier, am I correct? Was he at the heaven soul or earth soul? Earth soul. Lu Shuiyan immediately replied. She instantly felt more confident in Ling Han's abilities. If Ruan Dongxia had been at the immortal palace tier, Ling Han would have been powerless to help. However, since he was at the same major tier as Ling Han could still use his source power of wood to help. This source power possessed the most powerful vitality, so in theory, it could treat all kinds of wounds. There were many people who needed help in this world, and Ling Han wasn't trying to be a savior either. He wouldn't stick his nose into everyone's business. However, since he had come across this situation, he was naturally willing to do his part to help. Whoa, so pitiful. We definitely have to help them. Fu Yu said as he returned. His eyes were already puffy from crying. This person was beyond saving. You guys go outside first. I need to channel some cultivation technique to treat him, Ling Han said. Yes, yes. Lu Shuiyan hurriedly replied with a nod. If Ling Han harbored evil intentions, there was absolutely no need for him to go to so much trouble. He could have directly attacked them. After all, neither of them was a match for Ling Han. You go outside as well. Ling Han said to Fu Yu. Huh? I also need to go outside? Fu Yu asked in a daze. Go out, go out. Hunyo said. She walked over and picked Fu Yu up before striding out. Ling Han was naturally shooing everyone away to keep the secret of his black tower. After everyone left, Ling Han knocked Wuming unconscious with a palm strike before drawing him into the black tower. The power of time flowed, and the black tower started to experience a time scale 1,000 times faster than the outside world. Ling Han started to treat Wuming, activating his source power of wood and funneling it into his body. He started to eliminate the poison bit by bit. If Ling Han fought with Ruan Dongxia, he could most likely dispose of him in a few hundred exchanges. However, eliminating the poison that the man had left in Wuming's body was a much more difficult task. In simple terms, destruction was much easier than construction. Not to mention, this was a case of large-scale construction after large-scale destruction. This could only be resolved with effort and time. Moreover, This was only because Ling Han was practicing the indestructible heaven scroll and possessed extraordinary comprehension of life and death that far surpassed that of ordinary dividing soul tier cultivators. Otherwise, most cultivators only knew how to fight and kill. As for healing and saving? Impossible. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, 3 years had already passed in the Black Tower. Only at this time did Ling Han finally retract his hand. He breathed a long sigh of relief. He had already eliminated the poison in Wuming's body. A smile spread across his face. During this process, he gained an even deeper understanding of how to channel the source power of wood. Not only had he saved someone, but he had even received some benefits himself. Sure enough, the heavens wouldn't treat good people unfairly. Chapter 2035, Arrival of Ruan Dongxia. Ling Han exited the Black Tower with Wuming, and shouted, "You can all enter now." "Brother Ming!" Lu Xuan exclaimed as she immediately rushed in. She focused her gaze on Wuming, who was currently lying on the bed. After observing him for a brief moment, she was instantly as moved as could be. His face was a healthy shade of red, and his aura was also extremely stable. There were no signs of any wound. He had been healed, fully healed. Moreover, it had only taken a single day. She immediately fell to her knees, and said, "Benefactor." Ling Han made a waving motion, pulling her up from the ground. He then shook Wuming awake. "Xuan. Brother Ming." The pair of lovers erupted into tears as they embraced. They had just escaped from the clutches of death, so they were naturally filled with an overwhelming sensation of relief. "Brother Ming, have you truly recovered?" Lu Xuan murmured. "Yes, I've made a full recovery. I'm not dreaming, am I?" "No." They were overtaken with emotion, and they surprisingly started to passionately lock lips as if no one were around. "So moving, so moving," Fu Yu remarked. Upon seeing Fu Yu's reaction, Ling Han felt like he could never take him seriously anymore. He would definitely be blinded by his emotional displays. "Ling Han, Niu also wants a kiss," Hu Niu said. She stuck her lips out as she shuffled over. Ling Han laughed heartily, and he quickly turned around to peck Hu Niu's lips. Bewitching Maiden Ro shuffled over, and said, "I also want one. Go find some shade." Bewitching Maiden Ro couldn't help but feel disappointed. This stinky man. All she wanted was a kiss. Did he really need to be so stingy? "Kiss. Kiss." "Sure lay and sure you," shouted from the side. "Lu Xuan," someone roared in a thundering voice. Lu Xuan's and Wuming's expression instantly changed. They were far too familiar with this voice. This voice belonged to none other than the person who had caused them so much pain and suffering. "Ruan Dongxia. Did you think you could escape from my palm?" Ruan Dongxia asked. "I only remained hidden to let you suffer the consequence of daring to steal my woman. In 3 days, the poisonous wound on Wuming's body will fully erupt. In 7 days, he'll die a violent death. I'm going to accompany you as we watch this trash die an agonizing death. After that, I'll take you back. What should we do?" Lu Xuan asked as she looked at Wuming. They had finally healed his wounds after going to so much trouble, yet Ruan Dongxia had already caught up to them. It was as if he were driving them to death. Wuming gritted his teeth before suddenly kneeling down to Ling Han, and saying, "Benefactor, I know that I already owe you a life, so I shouldn't beg you for any more help. However, I genuinely have no other options, so I can only beg you for help. I hope that you can help my wife safely leave this place. As my gratitude, I have a treasure that I'm willing to give you." "Brother Ming, no!" Xuan exclaimed as she leaped onto Wuming. "We either live together or die together." "Xuan." The two of them wrapped their arms around each other. "Ha ha ha ha. Cry, cry to your heart's content. Savor your last moments together." Ruan Dongxia roared with a wanton laugh. As he gazed at this pair of lovers, Ling Han involuntarily thought of his own parents. At that time, they had most likely gone through a similar experience. The difference was that his mother had already been pregnant with him. Since he had just saved Wuming's life, he naturally couldn't watch him die just like that. He chuckled to himself before exiting the small house. Who are you? Ruan Dongxia asked as he saw this unfamiliar man walking out of the house. His face involuntarily darkened. Fuck. This B**tch isn't cucking me, is she? However, several women followed after Ling Han, and each of them was breathtakingly beautiful. He couldn't help but gulp in lust. At this moment, he completely forgot about the fact that Lu Shuyan might have cucked him. Me? Ling Han asked with a faint smile. I'm just a passerby. Ruan Dongxia humphed and said, since you know that you're a passerby, you also understand that this has got nothing to do with you, right? Don't stick your nose into other people's business. I've never liked sticking my nose into other people's business. I simply want to pummel you, Ling Han said. Pummel me? Ruan Dongxia faltered for a moment. When he came to his senses, he involuntarily laughed and said, do you know who I am? I do. You're a piece of trash. Ruan Dongxia's expression instantly darkened. I'm the great-grandson of the seventh elder of the Star Moon sect. My great-grandfather is an Immortal Palace tier elite. In the celestial realm, Immortal Palace tier cultivators could indeed be referred to as elites. Oh. What's that got to do with me? Ling Han asked. Does it have anything to do with me pummeling you? I'm also an Earth Soul elite. Ruan Dongxia continued. With my strength, and with my background, you still want to challenge me? You speak too much nonsense. Ling Han said as he strode toward Ruan Dongxia. What a troublemaker. Ruan Dongxia spat in disgust. However, a sinister smile crept across his face when he swept his gaze over the Empress and the others. However, I should thank you for bringing me so many beauties. Smack. His smile had barely spread across his face when he suddenly suffered a heavy punch to the cheek. He was instantly sent flying. You actually dared to hit me? Ruan Dongxia asked in incredulity as he picked himself up from the ground. He rubbed his nose and glanced at his hand, only to see that it was filled with blood. He couldn't help but tremble. He wasn't trembling in fear, but rather in fury. From birth until now, who had ever hit him before? Moreover, this was a strike to the face. You've made me angry now. He shook his right hand, and strands of light immediately appeared in the air. There were 7 strands in total. 7 blooms, 7 poisons, palm strike. Shuyan exclaimed. She had also walked out with Wuming. There was intense fear in her voice. After all, her lover had been tortured by this poisonous attack for so many years. In fact, he had almost been tortured to an agonizing death. Be careful, benefactor, Lu Shuyan hurriedly said in warning. This poisonous palm strike is the ultimate technique of the 7th Elder's branch. According to rumors, he learned this technique from an ancient Ruan. In fact, it might even be an ascending origin tier secret technique. Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He didn't take this warning to heart. Cleansing the poison from Wuming's body had indeed been difficult. However, with his physique, only those at or above the Immortal Palace tier could hope to poison him. After all, poison was also a regulation of heaven and earth. This was no different from any other regulation. That's right. This is the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike, Ruan Dongxia said with pride. Those who are struck by the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike will suffer for an entire 7 years, during which time 7 flowers will bloom on their bodies. When these 7 flowers reach full bloom, the victim will die of decomposition within 7 days. He glanced at Wuming with a cold chuckle and said, the 7th flower has most likely bloomed inside him already. Death is already knocking on the door, huh? Strange. Why is his face such a healthy shade of red? Why does he look completely fine? Impossible. This is far too strange. Perhaps my poison was cleansed? How is that possible? Ruan Dongxiang was confident that even immortal palace tier elites couldn't cleanse the poison of the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike. The reason for this was simple. Destruction was far easier than construction. His poison had already become one with Wuming's body, so trying to cleanse the poison would inevitably require destroying Wuming's body. Thus, cleansing the poison would be equivalent to killing Wuming. That being the case, his poison naturally couldn't be cleansed. Perhaps ascending origin tier elites could give it a try. However, since the most powerful member of the Star Moon sect was only at the Immortal Palace tier, he naturally couldn't invite an ascending origin tier elite to try and cleanse his poison. Wuming's eyes were bloodshot, and he said, Ruan Dongxiang, you didn't expect this, did you? Your poison has actually been cleansed. His expression was as if he wanted to eat Ruan Dongxiang alive. Chapter 2036, Clash of Decrees. These 7 years could be considered the most agonizing 7 years of Wuming's lifetime. If it were not for Lu Shuyan's sake, he might have long since committed suicide. Even if Lu Shuyan had stolen the undying pill for him, it was only capable of keeping him barely alive. Whatever suffering he had to sustain, he would still have to endure, which would allow him to live for a few more years before being tortured to death by the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike. A poisoned injury would always need a specific medicine to be cured. And now that he had been saved from the hellish abyss by Ling Han, just how strong was Wuming's hatred towards Ruan Dongxiang? However strong his hatred was towards Ruan Dongxiang, that was how strong his gratitude was towards Ling Han. Ruan Dongxiang's expression was incredibly dark. He had not killed Wuming on the spot, because he hated this person too much, and wanted him to endure as much torture as possible before finally dying. Yet now he was standing right in front of him, looking like he had completely recovered. This was unacceptable to him. Passerby, not only do you like to meddle in other people's business, you are also too nosy. Ruan Dongxiang said menacingly, his killing intent blazing. Oh. Ling Han nodded, breaking into a grin. Going by that account, I do indeed quite like to meddle in the business of others. If you don't like it, come bite me. Sharp tongue. Ruan Dongxiang humphed coldly. With a shake of his right hand, a rolled-up scroll appeared in his hand. This was a precious treasure his great-grandfather had bestowed on him for protection, and it was a decree that this 7th elder had personally forged himself. The moment it was opened, it would send out an attack on the level of peak stage heaven soul. Precisely because he had this decree, Ruan Dongxiang was still filled with overwhelming confidence, even though he had just been sent flying with a single punch from Ling Han. Of course, he, too, wished to possess a stronger device, but the Star Moon sect was just a 3-star force, and the fact that they were able to give him this decree was already very impressive. You wish to use this bit of scrap paper to scare me? Ling Han asked with a smile. Benefactor, be careful. This is not a piece of scrap paper, but a decree. Wuming hurriedly pointed out. Ling Han couldn't help but feel exasperated. Did the other party really think that he was very ignorant? Ruan Dongxiang, meanwhile, laughed loudly. That's right. This is a decree, capable of killing all dividing soul tiers. In terms of battle prowess, you are indeed just that bit stronger than me, but in terms of treasures, there is no way you can compare to me. Idiot. Fu Yu shook his head. N? Ruan Dongxiang looked over, involuntarily showing a sliver of anger in his expression. Why was there always someone appearing repeatedly to cause trouble and oppose him? You are really an idiot. Fu Yu also drew out a scroll. I, too, have a decree here, so let us compare. Because he had been apprehended with a single move from Ling Han previously, he had not even managed to reveal his trump card. As the only male descendant in 3 generations of the Fu clan, how could he not have some powerful treasures in his possession? Ultimately, it was Ling Han that had moved too quickly earlier, and Fu Yu had not expected that he would also encounter danger in United Link City. Ruan Dongxiang couldn't help but scoff. They were just a bunch of trash, so what treasures could they take out? They had to be just trying to scare him off. If you people are so determined to seek death, I shall oblige. He flew into rage out of humiliation. Just think, he was a person that could oppress and tyrannize as he liked in the Star Moon sect, but here he had actually been mocked repeatedly, and had even sustained a punch. His killing intent blazed at this. He immediately opened the scroll. A shadowy line spread out, forming multiple seals, but not a single seal could be recognized. These were seals of Great Tao, a script belonging to the heaven and earth. When the scroll was completely unfurled, all the characters shattered, and then formed a massive black beast. It had the head of a tiger, body of an ox, tail of a scorpion, and a singular horn sprouting from its head. With a twisted expression, it roared, and the surrounding space suddenly shattered in an instant. Ling Han moved, channeling the regulations of space, and stowing away all the power of regulation that had seeped out. Otherwise, this small village would be instantly shattered to smithereens. Ruan Dongxia saw this, and was not overly shocked. That was because this was just a sliver of might from the decree, so it was very normal that Ling Han managed to block it. This is practically weak beyond description. Fu Yu said in disdain. He, too, broke open his scroll. Wang, silvery light shot out in a blaze. It was just light that was exuding out now, and when it shone on that massive black beast, this monster began to crumble like it was a buildup of snow that had encountered fire. What? Ruan Dongxiang paled in shock. The decree was his strongest, as well as his last, resort, but its might had not been fully unleashed yet, and it had already been destroyed. His heart almost exploded at this. A decree was definitely a manifestation of the power that a force had. The logic was very simple. Compared to such treasures like celestial tools and pseudo-celestial tools, the method of construction of a decree was considerably much simpler. One only had to use the hide of an immortal beast that was up to standard as the paper, and the blood of an immortal beast as ink, and when one had reached the severing mundane tier in cultivation level, anyone could easily create a decree. The stronger the might of the divided soul, the higher the requirements were for the materials used to create the decree, such as using the fur and blood of the dividing soul tier level, or immortal palace tier level beasts, but the creator would also have to be a dividing soul tier or immortal palace tier elite. Though these materials were not cheap either, compared to other objects, this was indeed the most easily created item. He had already taken out a decree that had been created by an immortal palace tier elite, possessing the attack power of the dividing soul tier, yet it could not even hold up to a streak of light from the other. Just how wide was the gap here? A complete domination from superiority by a major tier. Being able to draw out a decree that had immortal palace tier's attack power, what kind of concept was that? The other definitely had an immortal palace tier elite behind him, or even ascending origin tier. Ruan Dongxiang's feelings of superiority immediately crumbled. If the other party was the heir of a 4-star force, then he would really have met his match. He would be dead before he even knew it. I admit defeat, he called out hurriedly. This decree had just been unfurled a little, and it was already so terrifying, so just how frightening would it be when it was fully unfurled? He had no wish to die. Just because you say you admit defeat, I have to spare you? Fu Yu jeered, and unfurled the entire scroll without the slightest hesitation. Immediately, silvery light blazed brightly. Xiao, a sword light flew out from the scroll, and slashed towards Ruan Dongxiang in a flash, passing him quickly. The sword light surged past, and Ruan Dongxiang's whole person also disappeared completely. The might of this decree was comparable to an immortal palace tier, and for an immortal palace tier to make a move on a dividing soul tier, what would be so strange that the latter would completely disappear without a trace? Fuck, this was a waste. Ling Han shook his head. Even killing a piece of trash like Ruan Dongxiang, he had to use an immortal palace tier level decree. He really had cash to burn. However, in any case, it wasn't Ling Han's cash that was being burnt. Fu Yu sent a reserved smile at Ling Han. This attack was mainly shown for Ling Han's benefit, expressing the fact that he was actually very strong as well. Of course, He personally was the type to be easily touched, and also bore the intention of venting his anger on Wuming and his wife's behalf. Pa! The back of his head immediately sustained a smack, as he heard Hunyao say, "Ugly, what kind of expression and look do you have there? Do you want to rebel?" The force of this strike was extremely strong, and he stumbled from the impact. Fu Yu couldn't help but feel depressed. He only wanted to show off a bit. Did she have to treat him like this? Be benefactors, you have gotten into trouble. Meanwhile, Wuming was stunned silly. That was the 4th-generation grandchild of the 7th elder of the Star Moon sect, and now he had died here. This would cause a huge commotion. Ling Han shrugged, and said, "What does it have to do with me? I wasn't the one who killed him." Meanwhile, Fu Yu smirked arrogantly. "So what about it? Does the Star Moon sect dare to come and seek me out for vengeance?" The Fu clan was a 4-star force, so how could a mere 3-star force actually dare come to seek their own destruction? Moreover, even if their positions were exchanged, wouldn't the Fu clan still have a celestial king backing them up? Ling Han shook his head. "Let me tell you a bit of bad news. Though you have used a decree, you did not manage to kill that one guy." Chapter 2037, Black Ring. Impossible. Fu Yu immediately expressed disbelief. An immortal palace tier-level decree had shown its might, so how could it be that it was not able to kill a mere dividing soul tier? What kind of joke was that? Meanwhile, Ling Han grinned as he countered, "Do you want to make a bet, then?" "What kind of bet?" Fu Yu asked immediately. 100 million star stones. Fu Yu's face involuntarily flushed. This made him recall the mishap that he had caused. He had not even gotten anything clarified yet, but had already asked someone to take 100 million star stones as ransom for him. "All right," he immediately answered. Since someone was so determined to give him money, there naturally was no reason for him to refuse. Only then did Ling Han slowly say, "This Ruan guy isn't the main body, but just a divided soul of his." "Ah." Fu Yu paused. "Are you sure?" Pa, the back of his head immediately sustained a smack, and he heard Hunyao angrily declare, "Nyo's Ling Han already said that is a divided soul, so he must be a fake." "What, you want to renege on the bet?" The Empress also showed a menacing expression. He dared to swindle the money of their Ling clan? Fu Yu couldn't help but feel depressed. "Though I am not a sore loser, aren't you guys committing daylight robbery here? Just because you say he's a fake, he is? I can't even doubt it." Ling Han laughed loudly, and pulled Fu Yu along with him as he walked forwards. Pay careful attention. A divided soul was formed by extracting a sliver of the spirit from the main body, and the largest difference it had with the main body was in the amount of spirit it contained. Fu Yu sensed earnestly, and after a while, he couldn't help but curse as he said, "It is indeed a divided soul." Though Ruan Dongxiang's spirit had already shattered, it had happened quite recently, so it wasn't very difficult for him to still be able to sense it vaguely. "Thanks for the business, 100 million star stones." Ling Han extended a hand. Thanks. Hunyao copied him, extending her hand as well. Xiao Gu was not willing to be left behind either, impatiently stretching out his hand as well. "Fuck, is it really proper for you guys to do this?" Fu Yu couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. These 3 people were all very strong, but why did they all look very undependable? Luckily, he did not die. Meanwhile, Wuming breathed a sigh of relief. Though losing a divided soul was a major injury, as long as he had not died, anything could be earned back through cultivation. However, he was also slightly despondent. If Ruan Dongxiang had not died, then didn't it mean that he and Lu Xuan would still be hunted down? Am I the type to renege on a bet? Fu Yu asked in displeasure. Fine. Come with me to get the ransom money. Oh, no, the betting stakes. Hearing him speak of ransom money, Ling Han and the others all burst into loud laughter. This guy was really quite amusing. Benefactor, please wait. Wuming hurriedly said. N? Ling Han turned to look at him. I am indebted to Benefactor for having rescued me twice. I do not have anything valuable on me, just an item that has been passed down for generations. Wuming drew out a ring, and handed it over to Ling Han. I am willing to gift it to Benefactor. What is it? Hunyao asked curiously, and snatched this ring. I don't know, either. Wuming shook his head with a grimace. It is said that my ancestor had obtained it unexpectedly. About several million years ago, my ancestor went into the mountains to cut firewood, and unexpectedly encountered two cultivators who were fighting each other to the death for the sake of an object. In the end, one of them won, but not too long after, he, too, died as his injuries were too severe. That treasure that they had been fighting over was thus brought back by my ancestor, and that is this ring. But even when my ancestor passed away, he still had not figured out what is so special about this ring. Generation after generation, the ancestors of the Guo clan all wanted to know what was so precious about this ring, but without exception, their efforts had all come to nothing. When it was passed down to me, I, too, had studied it for a very long time, and had also flipped through a great many ancient scrolls in the Star Moon sect, but still did not get any results. Though this could be completely useless, I still wished to gift it to Benefactor. Perhaps it would be of use in the hands of Benefactor. Nyo's. Hunyou's eyes narrowed in a glare as she said, What is it? You want to snatch Nyo's belongings? Now that it had fallen into her hands, it naturally was hers now. Meanwhile, Fuyu wanted to weep to the heavens. He clearly had helped out as well, but why was this married couple not even bothered to say a word of thanks to him? Furthermore, he had not called them into account for the matter of the undying pill yet, either. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious, and took this ring from Hunyou's hands. He placed it in the palm of his hand and surveyed it. This ring was really plain. It was just a small black ring, without any adornments on it. At first, Ling Han had thought this could be a spatial treasure, but no matter how much he used his divine sense to touch it, it did not react in the slightest. Then that shouldn't be it. He squeezed it hard, yet shockingly discovered that this thing was actually completely intact. This was very surprising. Just how great was Ling Han's strength by now? In the case of 2-star pseudo-divine metal, fingerprints would appear if he squeezed it hard, and even 3-star pseudo-divine metal would possibly slightly change shape. But now, this ring was completely unscathed. Should he use the divine demon's sword to deal with it? This thought flashed through Ling Han's mind and then vanished. He shook his head. What if this thing was really useful? It would be too much of a waste if it were to be swallowed by the divine demon's sword. I still want to try it out, though. Ling Han couldn't help but summon the divine demon's sword. He would control it in the nick of time, and only wanted to give it a try. He placed the ring on the blade of the divine demon's sword. Wang, the divine demon's sword trembled slightly, but an incident that astonished Ling Han appeared. The ring did not react at all. Though the divine demon's sword was only a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool, it was previously already mentioned that 3 stars, 5 stars, 10 stars, and so on were only human-made divisions. In terms of the essence of the regulations of metal, divine metal was the standard after godly metal, and the concept of pseudo-divine metal did not exist. The so-called pseudo-divine metal was forged having layer after layer of level 20 divine metal fused together, and in terms of essence, it was still level 20 divine metal. Which also meant that there was not the slightest bit of difference in difficulty for the divine demon's sword to swallow a 1-star pseudo-divine metal and 10-star pseudo-divine metal. However, because the 10-star pseudo-divine metal had more divine metal fused within it, the sword would need a longer time to swallow it. If the ring could not be swallowed by the divine demon's sword, there were only 2 possibilities. Firstly, this was not metal at all, so the divine demon's sword naturally could do nothing against it. However, Ling Han was sure that this was definitely metal, genuine and no deception about it, because he possessed a metal element source power of heaven and earth. If he still could not distinguish whether this was metal or not, then he might as well just jump into a river and commit suicide. But since it was metal, yet could not be swallowed, then it would have to be the second possibility. This was divine metal. Strictly speaking, the divine demon sword was still a god tool now, and also godly metal. The name of pseudo-celestial tool was only the label that was attached by the people of the celestial realm. Since that was the case, how could godly metal possibly be able to swallow divine metal? Wouldn't it be stuffed until it burst? Thus, the divine demon's sword did not react in the slightest, and the ring was also completely unmoved. Divine metal. Ling Han couldn't help but jump madly in his heart. Was this the precious tool of a celestial king? No wonder people had fought to death over it, and had even killed each other. This kind of precious treasure was indeed incredibly tempting to others. He did not tell Wuming about his deduction. Firstly, the strength of these two people was too low. If they were really to find out that he had possession of a celestial king-tier treasure, it would not be a good thing for them. Instead, it could possibly draw a fatal calamity onto their heads if they had a slip of the tongue. Secondly, they had not been able to figure out the use of this ring throughout these several million years, so it would be a waste even if it stayed in their possession. Ling Han took out some alchemical pills, and stuffed them into Wuming's hands. Smiling, he said, "What use this ring has, I am not sure either for the moment. However, I am sure that this is indeed a treasure." No. Benefactor, you have already saved us twice, so how could we still accept gifts from you? Wuming and his wife declined. Chapter 2038, Young Master has gone mad. Wuming and his wife kept declining. They really couldn't bring themselves to take further gifts from Ling Han, but they could not hold up against Ling Han's insistence, and could only accept those alchemical pills. Ling Han also gave them some reincarnation tea, compensating Wuming and his wife as much as possible. Even though he still did not know what use that ring had, merely the fact that it was forged from divine metal made it worth it. On the sidelines, Fu Yu's expression was filled with hurt. He had also helped out, but why did it seem like he had been forgotten? You guys are too mean. Wuming and his wife decided to leave United Link City after a few days. This time, the Seven Blooms Seven Poisons Palm Strike's influence within Wuming's body had also been dispelled, so they were sure that Ruan Dongxia could not possibly catch up with them again. All right, we should leave too. Ling Han stretched out languidly. Fu Yu played around with the alchemical vial that Wuming and his wife returned to him. There were still 9 undying pills inside here. He stowed the vial away, and said, "Let's go to my place first." He had never been the type to avoid repaying his debts. What is it? You want to lay a trap for us, and capture us in a single scoop? Ling Han asked with a grin. That's right. You guys don't dare to come? Fu Yu challenged. Pa, Hunyo delivered a smack right onto the back of Fu Yu's head. Fu Yu, be polite when you speak. Fu Yu looked plaintively at her. Is it very polite of you to hit me then? He did not dare to say these words to Hunyo. He had already suffered enough in the hands of this little girl these 2 days. Furthermore, he had developed a clear understanding that no matter how beautiful a woman was, she possibly could still be incredibly violent. Gentleness had never had any relation to appearance. All right, let's collect our winnings, Ling Han said with a grin. Initially, he had only been joking with Fu Yu, but since the latter was so determined to give him 100 million star stones, then there was no reason for him to refuse either, right? After all, the divine demon sword was still quite far away from becoming a real celestial tool, and he was in dire need of a great amount of star stones. The party returned. On their way back, there was no need for Hunyo to sniff around. Thus, their speed had increased considerably. After about more than a day, they had already returned to the main city center. Young Master. The moment they arrived, they saw a great many people gather around them, and the person in the lead was Fu Yu's protector. The old man glared, and demanded, "What have you done to young master in these several days? Otherwise, why else would they have disappeared quietly? Uncle Yu, where are the star stones?" Fu Yu asked. Oh, here. Uncle Yu drew out a spatial ring. Fu Yu strode over, and after taking it from him, strode back to Ling Han's side, and tossed the ring over. There is definitely no problem with my, Fu Yu's, character as a gambler. Seeing this scene, everyone, including Uncle Yu, were dumbfounded. Fuck, has your brain been kicked by a donkey? Just now, their young master could have clearly escaped from the hands of the devil, but now he actually took the initiative to take the ransom money, and hand it over to Ling Han. Was there something wrong with him? Could it be that this was not young master? Uncle Yu hurriedly swept his divine sense over him, but there was not the slightest issue. This really was his young master. Young master, could it be that your divided soul has been captured? Uncle Yu asked. Otherwise, why would he act in this manner? Even though the death of the divided soul would not cause any injury to the main body, the divided soul was still a portion of spirit that had been split out from the main body. Then, it definitely would still affect the main body, especially for those prodigies who were aiming for the high pinnacle of cultivation. This effect would be massive. Fu Yu shook his head, and said, Uncle Yu, there is no need to fret. These are my friends. Friends? Were there such friends that would rob you of 100 million star stones on the first meeting? Oh no, young master has really become abnormal. Just what did he experience in the last few days? In front of the wide eyes of the masses, Fu Yu escorted Ling Han and his group into the Fu Manor, providing a cordial reception. Because Fu Yu was the only descendant within 3 generations, the matter of his kidnapping had even alerted old Master Fu. He had made an exception and summoned Ling Han. And when Ling Han knew that this old Master Fu Bo, was a 4-star alchemist, he gladly agreed. Greetings, Senior Fu. When he was led by Fu Yu into the main hall, Ling Han greeted the elder that was seated at the seat of the host respectfully. Fu Bo, the actual ruler of United Link City and the chief alchemist under the moon-plucking celestial king. Not only was he a 4-star alchemist, he had also advanced to the ascending origin tier in terms of cultivation. Though alchemists were very weak in a battle of equal cultivation levels, ascending origin tier was still ascending origin tier, after all. Wanting to suppress any immortal palace tier would only be a piece of cake. Dispense with the courtesies. The old man raised his hand. His hair was completely white, and even his brows and beard were white, but the rosiness and smoothness of his complexion was like a baby's. He stared at Ling Han for a while, and then only did he say, I heard that you kidnapped my grandson. A show of strength right from the start then. Ling Han smiled, and said, Senior has misunderstood. Oh, since it is a misunderstanding, why did you accept 100 million star stones from our Fu clan? The old man asked calmly. It looked like the old man wanted to take this 100 million star stones back. Ling Han naturally would not agree. How could he possibly hand out something that had already entered his pockets? He immediately changed the topic, and said, I have a question on alchemy that I would like to ask Senior. Fu Bo immediately showed an expression of surprise. He knew that Ling Han was a cultivation prodigy, and could suppress his grandson even when he himself was only a young soul, and only a celestial king tier-level great sect would be able to nurture monarch tiers. This was also why he had only pressured Ling Han, and had not made it physical. Whatever that had been swindled had to be returned, but at the same time, he could not offend him too far either. Yet Ling Han actually wanted to ask him a question on alchemy. What fuck business is that of yours? Yet Ling Han simply continued to speak without concern. After leaving the Eastern Celestial Realm, he had never neglected his studies of alchemy even throughout these many years, and he had indeed accumulated a great many questions and doubts. At first, Fu Bo was unconcerned, but his expression became solemn very soon, and then he even showed an expression of excitement. Prodigy, this was an alchemy prodigy. Fu Bo had not taken any disciples, but had rather passed on all the comprehension of alchemy he had accumulated throughout his lifetime to his son, yet his son did not have natural talent in alchemist, and just barely managed to become a 1-star alchemist. Meanwhile, his grandson only had very high natural talent in cultivation, and could not inherit his legacy either. This was a regret that he had always had, worrying that his knowledge of alchemy would thus die out. And now that he had suddenly seen an extraordinary genius of alchemy, his heart instantly soared. He couldn't help but want to take him as a disciple so he could pass on his knowledge. The moment this intention to treasure talent arose, whatever Ling Han asked, he would explain with great care, only fearing that this prodigy would take a misstep and be misled onto the wrong path. That would be a loss to the entire field of alchemy, and would cause him to grieve and lament. The elder and youth continued to discuss alchemy endlessly, causing Fu Yu to feel both stunned and bored. He had initially thought that Ling Han was only doing it for show for the benefit of the old man to gain the old man's favor. He had never thought that Ling Han was really capable of alchemy, and it seemed like his accomplishments in the field were not too low, either. Otherwise, how could it possibly make the old man so serious? But Ling Han is clearly a monarch tier of cultivation. Was there really anyone so freakish in this world that could be prodigiously talented in two completely different fields? And what was boring was the fact that he really did not have the slightest interest in alchemy. As he listened to the two of them talk, it was like a fantasy story, making him feel so bored that he kept yawning. Furthermore, without getting the approval of his grandfather, how could he possibly dare to leave without permission? Thus, he could only suffer on the sidelines as he accompanied them, feeling discomfort that was indescribable fill his entire body. Finally, a whole 10 days later, the two of them finally stopped. I still have a question. Let's leave it for later, leave it for later. Fu Yu hurriedly pulled Ling Han up, and ran off without looking back. Previously, Ling Han had also said that he had a question, and Fu Yu was already forced to sit there for 10 whole days. If there was another question that Ling Han was asking, would Fu Yu even live through it? Chapter 2039, 100 Dragon City. Fuck, the Star Stones. Only after Ling Han had been pulled out the main doors did old Master Fu suddenly remember that the reason he had summoned Ling Han was to ask for the return of those 100 million star stones. Yet, in the end, he had been conned by Ling Han into actually forgetting it. This brat is really sly. The old man shook his head repeatedly. However, with his status, once this matter was mentioned once, there naturally could not be a second mention. Forget it. On the basis of Ling Han's talent in alchemy, he would consider those 100 million star stones as providing funding for him. Right, an alchemy gathering will be held at 100 Dragon City soon. Various prodigies from all over would be gathering, and this would not be a bad opportunity for this brat. I shall write an introduction letter for this brat then, and lend him a helping hand. Fu Yu was really quite a generous person. After turning from enemies into friends with Ling Han, he brought Ling Han all over to play every single day, almost causing the Empress and Hunyao to be displeased. Could it be that he wanted to snatch their man from them? For days later, Fu Yu came to seek out Ling Han again. Brother Ling, there is a great happy occasion, a great happy occasion. This guy called out immediately upon entering the doors. What is it? Are you pregnant? Ling Han asked with a laugh. You're the one who's pregnant, your whole family's pregnant. Fu Yu quickly countered. It was really easy to be led astray. He had only been around Ling Han for a few days, and this guy's verbal ability had increased at least 3 times over. Xiao Gu saw this with his eyes, heard this with his ears, and involuntarily mumbled. He was constantly learning. Where does this happiness come from? Ling Han asked. My grandfather has given you a referral. You can go to 100 Dragon City and attend a gathering of prodigies, Fu Yu said. Oh, what kind of gathering? Ling Han wasn't very interested. Firstly, he wanted to go to the Universal Peace Heaven. Having missed a gathering of alchemy, no matter what, he still had to go to offer an explanation for his absence. Secondly, he had to ask around about which heavenly realm the Rock Palace was in. 100 Dragon City? Not interested. It is rumored that in ancient times, there were more than 100 immortal dragons buried in 100 Dragon City. Afterwards, 100 Dragon City was built on the site. This is a holy land. Every several 100 million years, the 100 Dragons tournament battles would be held there. It is said that the person who becomes champion would be instilled with the essence of the 100 dragons, and obtain endless benefits. At the same time, a gathering of alchemy would also be hosted. Countless alchemy prodigies would gather here, contesting for the chance to enter into the ancient alchemy tower. Fu Yu explained excitedly. He did not have much interest in alchemy, and his main target was the 100 Dragons tournament battles. Now, Ling Han was intrigued, and he asked, "What is the ancient alchemy tower?" "What? You don't even know about the ancient alchemy tower?" Fu Yu was surprised. Even he, someone who had just roughly learnt some scraps of alchemy, knew of the ancient alchemy tower, yet Ling Han, this prodigy of alchemy, was actually completely blank. "I don't know." Ling Han shook his head. If he did not know, he did not know. There was nothing embarrassing about it. "Brother Ling, you really are a strange person," Fu Yu concluded, and explained, "The ancient alchemy tower is an alchemy organization. Very, very long ago, it had been established by all the 5-star alchemists of that era. After a long time, the ancient alchemy tower slowly turned from a loosely connected organization into a closely knit one. It is not only an alliance of only 5-star alchemists, but at the same time, it is also the holy land for the whole field of alchemy. For an alchemist, whether they had been approved by the ancient alchemy tower or not would mean a world of difference. Now, every alchemist would consider it an honor to be granted entry into the ancient alchemy tower. But every 100 million years, only the top 3 winners of the alchemy tournament of the 100 Dragon City would be qualified to join the ancient alchemy tower. Though it is said that we, as Celestials, have close to an unlimited lifespan, this kind of entry quota is still pitifully few. Brother Ling, if you could enter into the ancient alchemy tower, that would really be awesome. I guarantee that wherever you go, everyone will have to treat you politely. This is the strongest life-saving seal in the world." Ling Han gave an oso that was what the ancient alchemy tower was. "Where is 100 Dragon City?" he asked. "In the universal peace heaven." Ling Han stared blankly. The universal peace heaven? Could it be that the place he and Ma Tongguang were to go to was 100 Dragon City? However, the alchemy tournament would only be held once every 100 million years, so the one previously definitely could not be this tournament. In any case, he wanted to go to the universal peace heaven, so it was convenient. "I need a referral to attend that alchemy tournament?" he asked further. "Of course." Fu Yu nodded. "Just think, how many alchemists are there in this world? If there was no restriction, then wouldn't the 100 Dragon City be stuffed and burst?" Ling Han laughed and said, "Then I really have to thank your grandfather." "Of course. Only a 4-star alchemist is qualified to provide a referral. Furthermore, he can only give a single referral," Fu Yu said very matter-of-factly. Pa, immediately a smack landed on the back of his head. He did not even have to look. It had to be Hu Niu. "Ugly, what are you so proud about?" Indeed, Hu Niu's voice rang out from behind him. Ling Han gave an "oh," and asked, "When do we set out?" "Soon, within a month or so." Taking advantage of the time of this month or so, Ling Han asked the old master a few more times about alchemy, and also thanked him while he was at it. Time passed very quickly, and soon it was time for departure. Why are you coming along?" Ling Han looked at Fu Yu, appearing slightly surprised. Fu Yu couldn't help but feel depressed, and asked, "What do you mean by that? Do you think that because my strength is not as strong as yours, I am not qualified to attend the 100 Dragons tournament battles?" Ling Han nodded honestly and without reservations. That was exactly what he thought. "Fuck, though I am not a monarch tier, I am still an emperor tier. Could it be that I am not even qualified to participate?" Fu Yu retorted angrily. "Participate?" Ling Han laughed. "You haven't suffered enough, is that it? Fuck off." There was no restriction on cultivation level for the 100 Dragons tournament battles, but there was an age requirement. The participants could not be older than 10 million years old. This age limit included the time that had been spent under time acceleration effects. Thus, there really were not many people that could join. Of course, there were also some mediocre people who would participate, believing in their good luck, and thinking that those who were stronger than them would be barred from the tournament due to age. However, reality would deliver a harsh slap onto their faces. With the wealth of the Fu clan, they naturally would not have them walk the whole way there, but rather prepared a means of travel. That was a ground-piercing shuttle. It did not fly in the skies, but tunneled through the ground. The speed was similarly very fast, and there was no need for them to change course because of any obstruction in their way. The body of the ground-piercing shuttle was covered with earth element formations. When it entered the ground, it was just like having entered water, or flying through air. There was only one word for it: fast. The shuttle wasn't big. This was to save on capital. After all, the larger the area that had to be covered with formations, the more expensive it would be. In any case, they had spatial god tools, so there would not be much effect. The majority of them entered into the Black Tower, and then the ground-piercing shuttle started, heading towards the Universal Peace Heaven. This trip to the Universal Peace Heaven would take them through 3 heavens, and use about 7 months' time, and this was still because the ground-piercing shuttle was high-grade enough, so its speed was naturally fast enough. Otherwise, if it was something more inferior, then it would be extremely normal for the time to be tripled or even quintupled. Traveling underground, the chance of them encountering fellow travelers was naturally overwhelmingly low, and without encountering anyone, there naturally would not be any trouble. They successfully passed mountains and waters, heading all the way to the Universal Peace Heaven. Of course, they would also encounter some minor twists and turns, such as an earthquake or landslide, which would cause some trouble on the journey, but it was only small trouble. Slightly less than 7 months later, they had finally arrived in the Universal Peace Heaven. Chapter 2040, What a Coincidence. In the Western Celestial Realm, the Universal Peace Heaven was ranked above average in terms of overall strength. There were a considerable number of Celestial King tier-level forces here, but the very most famous was naturally 100 Dragon City. This was an important branch of the ancient Alchemy Tower. Every time the Alchemy tournament took place, it would be hosted here, and the city bore an extremely important responsibility. The ground-piercing shuttle tunneled out of the ground several dozen miles outside 100 Dragon City. They couldn't advance any further, or they would be treated like invaders, and be directly eliminated by the defensive formations of 100 Dragon City. Fu Yu stowed the ground-piercing shuttle away, while Ling Han released everyone from the Black Tower. The party then journeyed towards 100 Dragon City. It was only several dozen miles away, just the matter of a few steps for them. To enter the city, one had to pay a fee first. Since 100 Dragon City was a great city of cultivators, as well as a great city of alchemists, not only were there very many cultivators who came and went, there were also a great many merchants here. In the entire Western Celestial Realm, this could be considered one of the more bustling large cities. Thus, the entrance fee into the city was very high, extremely high. One person would have to pay 100 star stones, and their spatial god tools would also be searched. If it was discovered that there was anyone smuggling in, they would be executed. It was very strict, but they did indeed have the confidence for it. There were at least 10 5-star alchemists in the ancient Alchemy Tower, and their influence was incredibly wide-ranging. Since these were rules that they had set in place, who would dare to disobey? Ling Han and his group honestly paid up on the city entrance fees, and finally entered into this ancient city. It was said that there were more than 100 immortal dragons buried here. Perhaps it was only a myth, but it was indeed true that there would occasionally be sightings of the images of great dragons soaring from the earth and surging towards the 9 heavens in the city. Perhaps it was also because there were such bizarre scenes that it led to the legend of 100 dragons being buried here. Let's find an inn to settle first. Now that they were here, Fu Yu's name of young master was not very useful anymore. In United Link City, everyone would yield to him because he was the 3rd-generation heir of the Fu clan, but who would care about that here? For young masters like him, there were loads of them here. Brother Ling, don't meddle in the business of others here, Fu Yu reminded Ling Han. This guy was fond of meddling, but meddling would also have to depend on one's own strength. There were a great many matters here that they really could not afford to meddle in. Pa! The back of Fu Yu's head sustained another smack, and it was naturally Hu Nyo's work. Why are you being so fierce to Nyo's Ling Han? Ling Han, meanwhile, laughed loudly. It was really hard to say if he would meddle or not. Sometimes, if he sighted it, he would move on a whim of his. There was no way he could hold back. I'll try, he said. Little you have to control yourself too. Don't let your temper of a spoilt young master rise up again. Tui, how could I possibly lose control? Fu Yu scoffed. They found an inn where they settled down. Because there was a glutton like Hu Nyo in their party, the second matter on their agenda was naturally to gorge themselves. This in itself held a restaurant, but it was all private rooms, making it seem very high-end. But because the 100 Dragons tournament battles and the Alchemy tournament were close at hand, it was also overcrowded with guests here, and they couldn't even get a private room. Guests, the private rooms are really all full. The waiter bowed repeatedly towards Ling Han and his group. Nonsense, isn't this one empty? Hu Nyo asked, pointing at a private room. Very coincidentally, the doors of that private room were open, and they could clearly see that there was not a single person inside. That room is already reserved, the waiter said hurriedly. Since they aren't here yet, let us use it first. Worst come to worst, we'll give it back to them when they're here, Fu Yu also said. By now, he was Hu Nyo's faithful lackey. The waiter paused, but after a while, he nodded and said, I won't hide the truth. This private room has been reserved permanently by young Master Du, but there are indeed not many times he has come. How about this? I will allow your party to use the private room, but if young Master Du comes, you must definitely let him have the private room. Please don't make things difficult for me. Fine. Hu Nyo nodded continuously. At present, the only thought on her mind was food. The group entered into the private room, and dishes and beverages were served very soon. Upon tasting, the taste was really not too bad. As expected of 100 Dragon City. There was immortal beast flesh supplied here. As long as one could afford it, they even had immortal palace tier beast meat. For cultivators, not only was the meat of immortal palace tier beasts delicious and nutritious, it could even allow them to increase their appreciation of regulations. Even after an immortal beast died, there would still be a sliver of power of regulation contained within its flesh, so there would still be some benefits to be had. Of course, when this immortal beast flesh was being cooked, an elite was definitely needed to dispel the murderous aura from it. Otherwise, if one with a lower cultivation level consumed it, their intestines and stomach would be destroyed instantly. Fu Yu was very generous, and ordered a serving of immortal beast meat, and it was at the immortal palace tier at that. This had required close to 1 million star stones from him, and when it was served, there were only a rare few pieces of meat on the plate. Is it delicious? Nyo wants a taste. Hu Nyo was the first to move her chopsticks. Let me have a taste too. Ling Han stretched out his chopsticks as well without reserve, serving both the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden a piece of meat first, and then he himself took a piece. Not bad, let me have another piece. Hu Nyo stretched out her chopsticks again. There was no one serving bewitching Maiden Ro, so she could only move herself and feed herself. Xiao Gu copied his companions, and also stretched out his chopsticks quickly. Shirley and his sister were not slow, either. As long as one spent enough time around Hu Nyo, they would know that only if they moved fast enough would they get anything to eat. Food definitely had to be snatched, or they could only stay hungry. Chopsticks danced, and then Fu Yu shockingly discovered that the plate was now empty. Fuck, that was it? He hadn't even eaten a bit. His 1 million star stones. Even if he dumped it into the water, he could still hear a splash, and it could even cause a ripple. Guests, please quickly give way. Young Master Du is here. Right at this moment, that waiter suddenly ran over, his face filled with anxiety. Since they had already had a previous agreement, Ling Han and his group could not say anything either. They all rose up, and as for the remaining food, there was no need to worry. There was a glutton here that would have it wrapped for takeaway, and there was absolutely not going to be the slightest bit of wastage. They exited the private room, and had not taken a few steps they saw 7 people approach them. They were all extremely young, and were all men. Huh! One of them spotted Ling Han and his group, and his expression immediately changed. Even his body was beginning to shudder. Little Ruan, what's wrong with you? Have you been playing so hard yesterday that your knees are weak now? Someone beside him asked with a laugh. You really have made no mistake with your surname, you really have soft knees. Ling Han looked over, and suddenly felt like this was really a small world. That person was Ruan Dongxia. Ruan Dongxia raised his fingers shakily, appearing to be incredibly furious, but at the same time inconceivably terrified. This was natural. He had been killed once by Fu Hui, so naturally it would leave a very strong phobia in his heart. Little Ruan, what is it? The person in the lead of the other party, a young man in green robes, asked in a deep voice. He was walking at the forefront, and the remaining 6 were following his lead. A few months ago, they killed my divided soul. Ruan Dongxiang said harshly. At the time, I was pursuing my fiancée and her adulterer, yet was stopped by these people, and this person is the murderer who has killed my divided soul. He pointed at Fu Yu. Hearing him say these words, the green-robed young man and the others all erupted, and felt that Ling Han and his group were really too vicious, not only sheltering an adulterous couple, and even killed the divided soul of the victim. I never thought that there would be such people in this world. A young man dressed in purple robes walked out, sweeping an eye over Ling Han and his group before disdainfully saying, all of you kill your own divided soul, and then you may leave. However, he paused, pointing at Fu Yu. He has to stay behind. Chapter 2041, Angered. Very arrogant. To demand that each of them destroy one of their own divided souls, and Fu Yu was to stay behind too. Stay behind for what? Naturally to be killed. However, Ling Han and his party had seen this kind of situation quite frequently, and could not even be bothered to feel anger. In any case, they could directly crush them if they were unhappy, so what was the point of getting angry? Fu Yu, on the other hand, could not keep his cool. He was a standard young master. It would only be others that would be following his lead obediently in the past, and when had he ever been disobeyed? And now not only was there someone that dared disrespect him, they even wanted his life. How could this not make him angry? What arrogant words, are you all even qualified? Fu Yu scoffed. The young man in purple robes showed a prideful expression. I, Long Budian, have never failed to honor the words that I have said. Oh, then you're going to make an exception today. Fu Yu met him measure for measure. What are you people just standing around for? Quickly destroy your own divided soul, otherwise, your only fate is death. The young man in purple, Long Budian, turned to look at Ling Han and the others, his eyes menacing, and the word king actually appeared on his forehead. Hun Yo immediately felt very intrigued, and stared at that king on his forehead. Meanwhile, Ling Han smilingly asked, you all should not just listen to this person's side of the story, right? It was not that he feared these young men, but he had no wish to fight any meaningless battle, so he was willing to keep the peace. He related the story of Wuming and his wife, adding no extra details, nor did he exclude anything. When he was done, he smilingly said to these young men, everyone, do you still intend to stand up and appeal for justice for this trash? This. Long Budian showed a hesitant expression. He was indeed a profligate young master, and had always been a tyrant himself. However, he was a man with limits, and the actions of Ruan Dongxiang made him feel disgraced. You're pregnant, your whole family's pregnant. Right at this moment, Xiao Gu suddenly blurted out. Instantly, Long Butian and the others all looked furious. This was an extremely serious provocation, having insulted even their entire families. Ling Han couldn't help but turn to look at Fu Yu. These words from Xiao Gu were clearly copied from this guy. Meanwhile, Fu Yu looked embarrassed. Previously, he had advised Ling Han to keep a low profile and stay away from trouble, but in the end, it was he that had become the trouble magnet. First, he had been targeted by Ruan Dongxia, and now, because the words that he had once said were copied by Xiao Gu, it had led to another turn of events. "You're a pervert, your whole family are perverts." Xiao Gu continued to copy. This naturally had become fuel added to the fire, causing the rage of Long Butian and his group to burn and flame to the extreme. Ling Han sighed. This Xiao Gu could have learnt to speak at any other time, yet he coincidentally had to choose this moment. "In short, you are all trash." Xiao Gu concluded finally, and even pointed at Long Butian and his party, his voice and expression on point. "Ha ha ha ha." Hunyo burst out into uproarious laughter. "You're courting death." Long Butian was the first to move, and grabbed out at Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu's expression was completely puzzled, having absolutely no idea why the other would suddenly make a move on him. What did he do? And in the eyes of Long Butian and his party, this expression on Xiao Gu's face was just asking to be beaten. You had clearly said such offending words, and you actually still had an expression as if you were wronged? Just how detestable would that have to be? Long Butian humphed harshly, his fingers slightly stretched out, and the might increased further. Ling Han moved, and this strike from Long Butian was sent back. Yeah. Seeing this scene, the other 5 young men all looked astonished. Though Long Butian was a spoiled young master, he was an incredibly strong young master, with Earth Soul level cultivation, and was an Emperor tier as well. In theory, he should be invincible even in Heaven Soul, but Ling Han actually managed to withstand a blow from him. This was extremely shocking. "So you do have some strength." Long Butian humphed lightly, the fighting spirit in his eyes blazing. Ling Han had stepped out on Xiao Gu's behalf because he feared that Xiao Gu didn't know his own strength, and would accidentally kill the other. Though they were now on opposing sides, Ling Han did not think that there was any irresolvable hatred between them, and they had to battle each other to death. "Monarch tier," the young man in green robes said solemnly, his eyes bright. His name was Du Xiaojun. He was the leader of their group, and his natural talent in cultivation was also the highest. Not only had his cultivation level reached Earth Soul, he himself was also a monarch tier. Otherwise, he couldn't possibly have been looked up to as leader by Emperor tiers. Top-grade monarch tier, he added further. Ordinary monarch tiers would only be able to maintain invincibility with a gap of 2 levels, and with Ling Han's cultivation level at Yang Soul, he could only be invincible even against Earth Soul. Yet Long Butian was an Earth Soul level Emperor tier, which was enough to overcome any Heaven Soul. Hence, as Ling Han was able to match Long Butian, he definitely had to be a top-grade monarch tier. Ling Han fanned his hand. The exchange of blows with Long Butian caused his hand to feel slightly sore. It could not be helped. He was quite behind in terms of cultivation level. However, he had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and this kind of impact was no big deal for him. He smiled and said, "This friend of mine is a little blank. Don't take his words to heart." They could see that. Du Xiaojun, Long Butian and the rest were not idiots. Instead, they were all prodigies, though they were just a little arrogant and overbearing. There was something clearly off with Xiao Gu, looking rather like a fool. There was indeed no need to descend to his level. "Young Master Du, don't be tricked by him. This person is most skilled at scheming." Ruan Dongxia hurriedly called out. He was not one of Du Xiaojun's circle, and had only managed to mingle with them coincidentally, and just for a few days too. Thus, he was naturally worried that Du Xiaojun would be convinced by Ling Han, and refuse to avenge him. Du Xiaojun cast a cold stare at Ruan Dongxia. One could know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. He had not thought that this person who looked like a man of fine talent would actually have such an unbearable inner character. He had no wish to have this kind of trash become his follower. However, he did not display this, and only said to Ling Han, "If you can take 100 moves from Butian, I will befriend you." Though Ling Han had just withstood a strike from Long Butian just now, Long Butian had not gone all out at the time, and there was still a gap of 2 minor levels between the two of them. Even a top-grade monarch tier would find it very difficult to make up for such a massive discrepancy in battle prowess. And to take on 100 moves? Difficult. Ling Han smiled slightly, and replied, "All right." Du Xiaojun nodded, and was slightly admiring of Ling Han's courage. Then, with a toss of his hand, a chessboard immediately appeared on the ground. "Enter into the board for a match then." Xiao, Long Butian was the first to leap in. Hi's figure rapidly shrank in size, turning into a tiny dot on the chessboard. This was a spatial god tool, just a slightly different kind. Ling Han also leaped in, and stood opposite of Long Butian. "I will not pull my punches," Long Butian declared. "All right." Ling Han nodded, but he did not take it to heart. In the dividing soul tier, the person who could wound him severely should not have been born yet. Perhaps, the only one was Wuming, and he was a reincarnated 9th heaven celestial king, so could not be considered according to the normal logic. As for others, he could just ignore them. "Watch out." Long Butian stretched out a hand, his figure rising into the skies, with the word "King" glowing hotly on his forehead. He said that he would not be pulling any punches, but because this was a spar, his killing intent had already dispelled. However, the attack was still harsh. The word "King" on his forehead exuded a stunning brilliance, surging with endless power and frightening battle prowess. Ling Han released a battle cry, his hands balling into fists, and met the other in a head-on clash of force. Boom! 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 Not only was Ling Han a top-grade monarch tier, he also possessed 4 source powers of heaven and earth. Thus, his battle prowess had actually exceeded the range of monarch tiers. Just see, what other monarch tier would possess 4 source powers? To say nothing of 4, there was none that even had 1. Chapter 2042, Opening up the source powers of heaven and earth for development. Long, inside Ling Han's body, the 4 source powers were all flickering, as if they were about to slice open the heavens and earth. What was a source power of heaven and earth? It was a part of the foundations of the world when the heaven and earth first split apart, and had a unique significance. For example, though the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water would disappear, the heaven and earth would eventually nurture them anew. Unless this heaven and earth also died, the source powers of heaven and earth would exist eternally. Ling Han had a feeling that he was far from having released the full might of the source powers of heaven and earth inside his body. Otherwise, his battle prowess would be able to improve further, and he would truly be able to match Wuming, or even surpass him. He battled fiercely with Long Butian as he continued to ponder a way to make himself even stronger. Before this, he had already been considering this problem, and already had some vague idea, but he had never put it into practice. It was very simple, and that was to inscribe formations inside his body. In the ancient realm, he had already tried this, and the effects were astonishingly good, but in the celestial realm, this was an impossible feat. Celestial-level formations were incredibly massive, such as a great mountain protection formation, or the formation inscribed on a battleship. To inscribe formations on the godly bones inside the body, this could not be said to be impossible, but at least for now, Ling Han was not able to do so yet. Then how was he supposed to inscribe formation patterns? Use the source powers of heaven and earth. The source powers of heaven and earth were at the celestial king tier. As long as he could guide a sliver of their might, supreme battle prowess would be able to burst out. And what Ling Han had to do was to release this might. How to release this might? using the relationship of restraint and support among the 5 elements. Though there were only 4 source powers of heaven and earth at present, which could not form a perfect circle of the 5 elements, but there was only the shortage of one, so he should still be able to guide it, though the might would be considerably weaker. Let's test it out. Ling Han activated a source power of heaven and earth. Boom, it turned into an incredibly ancient seal that was inscribed onto one of his godly bones. Then, it began to slowly dissipate. The secrets of the heaven and earth could never have been inscribed. He activated a source power of heaven and earth again, and inscribed on the second godly bone, and then it was the third. However, he had not even activated the 4th source power of heaven and earth when the seal on the first godly bone had already completely dimmed. No, he was too slow. Ling Han thought, then let's try again. Boom. He was trying fiercely inside his body, and in the outside world, Long Butian was also intensely battling him. He had completely suppressed Ling Han. His hands formed claws, palm strikes, and punches that endlessly barraged Ling Han's body. However, though Ling Han was slightly distracted, his defense was not the slightest bit breached. No matter how Long Butian attacked him, he was still completely unhurt, causing Du Xiaojun and his group who were spectators to frown. How could there possibly be a freak with such frightening defense? Ling Han continued to study his new move inside his body. He had a feeling that he was close to succeeding. 91. 92. 93. On the outside world, everyone was counting, and the limit of 100 moves was already close at hand. Peng, peng, peng. The more Long Butian fought, the more intense his attacks became. Since young Master Du said he was to spar with Ling Han, that meant that there was no longer any animosity between both of them, but as an elite, he still wanted to win. Though Ling Han had been beaten submissively all this while, this was not the result that Long Butian wanted. Instead, he wanted a victory that could not be doubted and that he had obtained after battling to his heart's content. Hence, his battle prowess was on full throttle, pouring out a mad barrage of attacks on Ling Han. 99. Wang, right at this moment, a majestic light flashed within Ling Han's body. His aura suddenly strengthened by a good few times over, but it immediately dimmed back down. Peng! Ling Han took another blow, and his whole person was sent flying. Then, he landed back on the ground, sliding back at least a few hundred meters on the ground before he finally stopped. 100. Long Butian still wanted to continue the assault, but after some thought, he did not do so in the end. The battle had already ended. He was the first to step out of the chessboard, and then Ling Han slowly flew back out. He looked completely dazed, as if he was preoccupied. I will befriend you. Du Xiaojun laughed, and took the initiative to stretch out a hand towards Ling Han. Ling Han still looked completely blank, and stretched out his hand dumbly, shaking Du Xiaojun's hand. Since we're friends now, come, let's drink. Du Xiaojun pulled on Ling Han's wrist, and invited him into the private room. Then, he said to the waiter, serve all the fine wines and dishes. Niu wants to eat immortal beast meat, and it has to be at the immortal palace tier. Hu Niu hurriedly called out. She had no idea of the concept of being reserved. A muscle involuntarily twitched in Du Xiaojun's cheek. Though his identity was illustrious, it had not reached the extent that he could dine on immortal palace tier beasts willfully yet, but he had already boasted just now, so he could not bring himself to step back now. He could only nod at the waiter, indicating that the latter could serve this dish. Got it. That waiter hurriedly left with the order, his expression filled with happiness. If this kind of precious meat was sold, he as the promoter would also be rewarded. Though he had not promoted anything at all this time, the bonus would still be written onto his account. It was not too much, just 100 star stones, but for a minor character like him, 100 star stones was definitely considered an exorbitant sum. Ruan Dongxia also wanted to follow them into the private room. However, with a glance from Du Xiaojun, a young man in yellow robes stretched out his arm with a chuckle, blocking Ruan Dongxia from advancing any further. Young Master Du. Ruan Dongxia called out immediately. Get lost. The expression of the young man in yellow robes turned cold. This kind of trash actually wanted to join their circle? Previously, they had been deceived by him, so how could that even be possible now? Ruan Dongxiang's face was as red as blood. To him, this could be considered an unbearable humiliation. His hands clenched tightly, forming fists. After a while, he finally turned around and left furiously. He would remember the humiliation today, and would definitely get his revenge in future. Seeing him leave, the young man in yellow robes said, "Young Master Du, this person is clearly the type to hold grudges. Should we?" He made a motion that mimicked slitting the throat. Yet Du Xiaojun only smiled faintly, and said, "So what if this kind of minor character holds a grudge? If he really dares to stretch out his hand, I will take his wretched life." The others all nodded. Du Xiaojun was definitely qualified to say these words. They then returned their attention to the banquet. Du Xiaojun was a monarch tier, and had an elegant demeanor and grace. He could casually tell them of any interesting anecdotes, easily making them smile or roar with side-splitting laughter. He was completely dominating the atmosphere. Meanwhile, Ling Han was completely sleepwalking the entire while, as if he had lost his soul. Du Xiaojun and his party thought that he was feeling despondent because of having lost to Long Butian, and all tried to console him. After they were done with their meal, Du Xiaojun ardently invited Ling Han and his group to visit his manor, but the Empress declined him tactfully. She helped support Ling Han as they returned to their accommodations. Anyone who was not in the know would think that Ling Han had gotten drunk. However, the truth was that Ling Han was completely immersed in his own world. In the final clash with Long Butian, he had finally successfully grasped a sliver of opportunity, and seen a way to boost the source powers of heaven and earth. However, this kind of inspiration had passed in a flash, and he had been earnestly trying to recall it all this while. Thus, it looked like he had been struck dumb, causing Du Xiaojun and his party to misunderstand that he was feeling unhappy due to having lost. After returning to the inn, he immediately entered into the Black Tower, and went into comprehension underneath the reincarnation tree. In the outside world, 3 days' time passed in the blink of an eye. Inside the Black Tower, a change that turned everything completely upside down was taking place in Ling Han's body. On each of the 4 godly bones, there was an ancient seal flickering, but always when the last one lit up, the first one would dim, and they could not light up all at once. That's it. He suddenly snapped his eyes open. Wang, his eyes blazed, capable of piercing through the darkness. Wang, on the 4 godly bones, 4 seals lit up simultaneously. Chapter 2043, Astonishing Might. Success. Ling Han didn't even get the time to feel pleased when he saw the 4 seals on the 4 godly bones inside his body suddenly resonate with one another, and it was becoming increasingly intense. *T. Ling Han only managed to yell internally when he felt a frightening force surge over him. Pa, 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 pa. The godly bones in his body all shattered in an instant, and his mind was also destroyed at the first instant. Boom, flames burned brightly, and Ling Han walked out from the fiery flames. Brat, you almost killed yourself. Small Tower appeared, and gave him a harsh warning. If this had been 3 days ago, there would have been no way you could use rising from the ashes, and you would have died immediately. After rising from the ashes was used once, a very long amount of time was needed before it could be used a second time. Previously, Ling Han had already died once when he had collected the firm essence green gold, and that hadn't been too long ago either. Ling Han also felt lingering fear, but how could he have foreseen that? When the 4 source powers of heaven and earth resonated and shook together, it could actually cause a burst of such frightening might, so powerful that even his physique could not even withstand it. Are you an idiot? Those are source powers of heaven and earth, and are of the same level as celestial kings. Their might is only limited because they are affected by your cultivation level. But if you are so determined to forcefully unlock this seal, what else could it be but a suicidal move? Small Tower continued to reprimand him harshly. Yet Ling Han shook his head, and said, "It was my mistake this time, but even if I was given another chance, I will still choose to do so. Because, if I do not do so, there is absolutely no way I can be a match for Ji Wuming." And only now did Ling Han see a real hope of defeating Ji Wuming. At least, there was absolutely no possibility that Ji Wuming would be able to shatter Ling Han's body in a single move, but Ling Han could accomplish that. Thus, if he unleashed this blow, Ji Wuming definitely could not stand against it. I really have to study it carefully. This is used to damage my enemy, not to kill myself, he mumbled to himself, and began to study it again. You're nuts. You've gone mad. Small Tower murmured. It could not understand why Ling Han had to do this, risking his life in an action that seemed so unwise to it. Yet Ling Han enjoyed it and never tired. He walked on the edge of danger, yet was so excited that every single pore on his body relaxed and expanded. He guided the four source powers of heaven and earth again, but this time, before they completely exploded, he completely poured this power outside. Boom, a crimson land that was 1,000 miles in diameter immediately appeared ahead of him. So strong. Ling Han was slightly dumbfounded. The destructive power of this is stronger than that of any celestial technique that I have grasped, but the disadvantage is that it cannot be changed. It is merely an attack blasted out. If the opponent's speed is fast enough, he is completely capable of dodging. In that case, I will have to think of a way for this attack to explode even faster, and for the range of blast to become wider so that there would be no way of dodging. Additionally, I feel this attack could explode just the slightest bit later so the four source powers of heaven and earth could resonate for a little bit longer. No. This cannot be considered resonance, but rather making use of the independent nature of the source powers of heaven and earth, causing them to collide with each other, which leads to the seals on them unraveling just the slightest bit, bursting out with destructive power that has surpassed my cultivation level. The longer the time of collision is, the more the seal would be unlocked, and the more terrifying the destructive power naturally would be. I just have to control this extent. Ling Han tried again. This time, he allowed the four source powers of heaven and earth to collide longer. Boom, the frightening attack was launched, and everything within 10,000 miles of him turned into nothing. Wah! Opening his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood. It was golden, looking like liquid gold. I almost died. He wiped off the cold sweat. This was really wandering on the boundary of life and death. Just now, he had allowed the four source powers of heaven and earth to clash just a little longer, and the burst of might soared in power, but at the same time had caused severe injury on him, and all his godly bones had shattered completely. If it had been that slight bit longer, he would definitely have died. This is really exciting. He laughed at himself. As he channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, his injuries immediately healed. These injuries were caused by himself, so the martial intent that was left inside his body naturally could not cause a conflict inside his body. Thus, the moment the indestructible true fluid was channeled, his godly bones recovered instantly. Small Tower was already so furious that it was giving him the cold shoulder, and did not say a single word. Ling Han studied his project continuously. He wanted to find a point of balance between power and safety. Another 3 days passed in the outside world, and Ling Han finally stopped. Success! He broke into a grin. However, using the collision of the four source powers of heaven and earth to explode with an attack that can destroy the heaven and earth, can this be considered my own strength? Strictly speaking, this is also depending on external power, but I have just stowed this external power in my own body. My present cultivation level is too low, so I just have to borrow the force of an external power. When I reach the pinnacle, I myself will be the strongest. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and asked the women if anything had happened in the last few days. Yes. Countless prodigies have gathered, waiting for the 100 Dragons tournament battles to start, Hunyo said. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. That's right. When is this 100 Dragons tournament battles going to begin? One could really be quite speechless with him. He had come here to participate, yet didn't even know what time the tournament would be held. Looks like it will still take over a dozen days, the Empress said. Is it going to be tournament stage battles? Ling Han asked. No. The Empress shook her head. It is said that everyone will be entering into a natural mystery realm, and participate in some kind of contest there. The first one to walk out of it, or ascend to the pinnacle and reach some kind of throne, or obtain some kind of treasure would be first place. They would be instilled with power from the 100 dragons of the mystery realm, and have endless benefits. Hearing her say such, Ling Han knew that the Empress wasn't very familiar with the 100 dragons tournament battles either. He went to seek out Fu Yu, and get some detailed information. In the 100 dragons mystery realm, there are a total of 3,000 great paths. A great path is referring to multiple pathways, and not the Tao of heaven and earth, Fu Yu explained. Ling Han couldn't help but grit his teeth, and retorted, I understand this part. There is no need for you to take me for an idiot, and deliberately explain this. Hee, I was just afraid that you would misunderstand, Fu Yu said very shamelessly with a smile. All right, continue. After we enter into the 100 Dragons mystery realm, we have to walk these 3,000 great paths. Only once we will have walked these 3,000 great paths will the real contest truly begin, but I am not too sure of the exact details either, Fu Yu said. Interesting. Will the alchemy gathering be held after the 100 Dragons tournament battles then? Ling Han asked. Fu Yu nodded. It's like that every time. No matter how long the 100 Dragons tournament battles would continue for, ultimately, the alchemy tournament would be after it, so there is no need for you to worry. The entry requirement for the 100 Dragons mystery realm was being less than 10 million years old, and it would open once every 100 million years, which meant that no one could enter twice. Thus, all information about what was contained within had only been passed on through word of mouth by others. Then, we'll just wait for the 100 Dragons mystery realm to open. In the next few days, Ling Han was still focused on studying the 4 source powers of heaven and earth. He called this a clash of source powers. At present it was 4 source powers, but in the future, it could possibly be 5, 7, 9. Meanwhile, Fu Yu hung out with Du Xiaojun and his group as if they were joined at the hip. They were all spoiled young masters, and had similar tempers, so they naturally hit it off. Very quickly, 13 days passed. Boom, a massive bang echoed throughout the entire city. Whichever corner one was in, they could hear it clearly, and when they all walked out, they only needed to raise their heads, and they would be able to see the images of 100 dragons entwined together in the skies above them. Finally, these dragon images grouped together to form a doorway. The 100 Dragons mystery realm was open. Chapter 2044, 4 Great Monarch Tears. Let's go. Multiple figures flew towards that doorway in the skies. Shio, shio, shio. When the figures passed through that doorway, they immediately disappeared from sight. That was a mystery realm. Ling Han, the Empress, and the others also flew, pouncing towards that doorway. Wang, 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 wang. One after another, it was as if the figures were passing through mud, their movements slowed. However, when they passed through these doors, they suddenly felt a feeling of ease fill their whole bodies. Ling Han discovered that he was presently standing on a cliff, and multiple bridges were connected to this cliff. Upon counting, there was no less and no more, but 3,000 exactly. So these were the so-called 3,000 great paths. Great Tao naturally numbered more than 3,000, but has always been represented by 3,000 great paths. Ling Han uncovered that 2,990 of the great paths were extremely ordinary, and were not much different from ordinary covered bridges, while the remaining 10 were more unusual. 9 were golden, and 1 was black. After so many countless years, there has only been a mere 321 people that could step on those 9 golden paths. On average, there is even less than 1 person every time, Fu Yu said. Brother Ling, do you know how many years this is? At least an epoch. However, every person that could step on the golden paths had become a fifth heaven celestial king at least. Over an epoch, there were actually only a mere 321 people that had managed to step on those 9 golden paths, which showed just how high the difficulty level was. You cannot simply step on these great paths just because you want to. You must be guided by your heart. Whichever great path is closest to the Tao that you cultivate, that great path would then light up. Otherwise, if you stepped on another path, you would immediately lose your footing and fall down. In this place, don't even think of flying. As for those that have fallen off this cliff, I have never heard of anyone managing to survive. Hunyo was curious, and pointing at that black path, she asked, "What about this one?" This black-colored bridge is also called the Most Venerable Divine Path, and so far, there has not been one that has managed to step on it, Fu Yu said. Most Venerable Divine Path. Ling Han looked closely. Actually, every bridge was formed by a dragon, and the end connecting their side was the dragon's tail, while the body of the bridge itself was the dragon's torso, and it extended across countless miles. He was sure that the other end would be the dragon's head. The golden paths were different. Every bridge was formed by 9 dragons interwoven together. Their dragon claws protruded, showing endless overbearing might. The most unique one was naturally that black-colored path, which was formed by a total of 99 dragons. It was like the Emperor of Dragons, exceptional and domineering. While they were conversing, people were already stepping forwards to stimulate the dragon bridges. There were very many people. Thus, the dragon bridges would endlessly flicker with light, as if they were the keys of a piano being played, which looked incredibly lively. But it was indeed just as Fu Yu had said. Not one person managed to stimulate the golden bridges. Through an epoch, only a mere several hundred people had managed to step on them. All of them had been king among kings, overlord of overlords. Of course, also because of the fact that this would only once open every 100 million years and the restriction that those exceeding 10 million years in age could not enter, about 90% of all top-grade prodigies would not be able to come here. Otherwise, theoretically, the number of successful people would still be able to multiply tenfold. Wang, an extremely imposing and domineering aura surged past, and a person appeared in the skies. This was a man of lanky build, dressed in green robes and extremely dashing in appearance. Tian Qingyue. It is actually Tian Qingyue. I did not expect that he would actually come here. Gods, this is one of the top 3 monarch tiers of the universal peace heaven. So what if it is the top 3? If he could obtain the benefits of the 100 Dragons Mystery Realm, then he would no longer have to share the position with Xia Hotong, Yu Huaqing, and Zhu Huiyun, but would instead become the one and only monarch. Isn't he in the top 3? Why would there be 3 other people that share the position with him? That is because Yu Huaqing had not participated in the monarch tier ranking battles that year, but his strength is publicly acknowledged as being ranked in the top 3. Thus, these 4 people have always been talked about together. The strength of these 4 people is close, and they have never managed to decide which one of them is the one and only monarch. However, I am sure that after this contest, the result will be clear to see. Now that this kind of super character had appeared, it was naturally inevitable that he would be discussed by others. As Ling Han listened, he couldn't help but take a second look at Tian Qingyue. This person was unfathomable. Do you know of this person? Ling Han asked Fu Yu. Though the 2 of them did not belong to the same heavenly realm, Tian Qingyue seemed to be extraordinarily famous. Perhaps Fu Yu might know something about him. However, Fu Yu shook his head. Even celestial kings had not been to many heavenly realms, what more a minor character like himself. Tian Qingyue, cultivation level of the peak stage of the heaven soul. After the 100 Dragons Mystery Realm this time, he would probably be establishing his immortal palace. A voice suddenly rang out from behind Ling Han. Ling Han turned his head to look. It was Du Xiaojun. The latter was a citizen of the Universal Peace Heaven, and was monarch tier at that, so he naturally would not be unfamiliar with Tian Qingyue. Peak stage heaven soul? Ling Han murmured. He had confidence in himself, but was definitely not blind. At present, his battle prowess was indeed very high, especially after he had grasped the method of great clash of source powers. At that instant, the battle prowess that he could burst out with was incredibly terrifying. However, if he wanted to defeat a peak stage Heaven Soul Monarch tier, that was still filled with unknown variables. I really want to spar with him. Wang, the light doors in the skies suddenly flashed, and another person had entered into the mystery realm. He, too, caused a commotion. Xia Hotong. This was another supreme monarch tier of the universal peace heaven, ranked equal with Tian Qingyue. Xiao Hotong. Tian Qingyue. The two super monarch tiers stared at one another. The intense fighting spirit in their eyes could be seen, as if a great battle could explode at any moment. I haven't missed anything, right? With a laugh, another young man entered into the mystery realm. Yu Huaqing. The people below all exclaimed in shock. This was really coincidental. The three supreme monarch tiers would actually show themselves at about the same time. Without waiting for the masses to catch their breath, another monarch tier had arrived. This time, it was a woman. She was exquisitely beautiful and dressed plainly, but it could not conceal her supreme grace, causing hearts to beat wildly. Zhu Huiyun. The four great monarch tiers had all gathered together, representing the strongest in the dividing soul tier of the universal peace heaven. Though universal peace heaven still had other monarch tiers, they were on completely different levels when compared to these four people. The stupid bird would fly first, Du Xiaojun said. Brother Ling, we can't compare to those four freaks, but it is never the strongest person who ends up laughing last in the 100 Dragons tournament battles. Another factor would be luck. Leaving first would mean an additional sliver of opportunity. He strode out, and went to stimulate the 3,000 dragon bridges. After a while, 8 dragon bridges lit up at the same time. This meant that Du Xiaojun had as many as 8 choices. He could walk on any one of these dragon bridges. He hesitated slightly, and then chose the dragon bridge on the extreme left. These 8 dragon bridges were all related to water element Tao, which was also the great Tao that he cultivated. Because they were similar in nature, they had thus lit up at the same time, offering him an invitation. As expected of Du Xiaojun, to be actually capable of stimulating 8 dragon bridges. Too bad. As long as he could stimulate another bridge, it would form a qualitative change, and gain him the approval of the golden dragon bridges. This is the difference between a monarch tier and a top-grade monarch tier. Perhaps it is only a sliver of difference, but this sliver has formed a world of difference. Du Xiaojun strode out, and gradually walked further and further away. Soon, his figure could no longer be seen. I'm going. Fu Yu leaped out. Chapter 2045, Stimulating the Dragon Bridges. Fu Yu also went to stimulate the dragon bridges. After a while, 5 dragon bridges lit up at the same time. Ling Han had already witnessed it many times over. Ordinary cultivators could only stimulate a single dragon bridge, while king tiers could stimulate at least 2, but it would only be 3 at most. As for emperor tiers, the number of dragon bridges they could stimulate at the same time would be between 4 to 6. Meanwhile, monarch tiers would be able to stimulate between 7 to 9, and when the number reached 9, it would lead to a qualitative change, gaining the approval of a golden dragon bridge. Fu Yu could stimulate 5 dragon bridges at the same time. This kind of natural talent would rank him above average among emperor tiers, which was considerably good. Fu Yu turned around, and said to Ling Han, Brother Ling, I'm leaving first. Then, stepping on a dragon bridge, he strode off. On the other side, the 4 great monarch tiers stared at each other for a while, and then began to stimulate their own dragon bridges respectively. Since I was the first to arrive, I will be the one to get the ball rolling. Tian Qingyue walked out. He began to stimulate the dragon bridges. This attracted the attention of the others, and they all looked over. Tian Qingyue. Can he stimulate the Golden Dragon Bridge? He probably can. If even the super monarch tiers ranked in the top 3 couldn't do so, that would be much too inexcusable. That is not definite. The 100 Dragons Mystery Realm would open every 100 million years, but is it definite that there would be someone that could stimulate the Golden Dragon Bridges? On the contrary, it is instead more frequent that no one is capable of stimulating the Golden Dragon Bridges. But Tian Qingyue is different. He will definitely be able to. That's right. He will definitely be able to. The majority were filled with confidence in Tian Qingyue, and thought that he would definitely be capable of stimulating the Golden Dragon Bridges. Wang, an ordinary dragon bridge lit up, and then it was followed by another, and then came the third, and the fourth. This naturally was within everyone's expectations. Monarch tiers would be able to stimulate 7 dragon bridges at least, and with Tian Qingyue's strength as a supreme monarch tier, it was completely no problem for him to be capable of stimulating 8 dragon bridges. The key was whether he could stimulate the 9th, and cause a qualitative change. When the 8th also lit up, everyone's eyes widened as they involuntarily became anxious. Would he really be able to do it? After only a while, the 9th ordinary dragon bridge lit up, and then all 9 dragon bridges dimmed at the same time. At the same time, a golden dragon bridge shone with majestic brilliance, the 9 dragons entwined on it seeming to come alive while exuding a terrifying aura. This was the intimidating pressure of the Celestial King tier, and even top-grade monarch tiers could not bear it, their faces paling. However, Tian Qingyue was completely unaffected. It was as if he could be spared from this kind of pressure now that he had gained the approval of the Dragon Bridge. As expected of Tian Qingyue. Heavens, the Golden Dragon Bridge approved of him. This has to be dated back to the last time the Golden Dragon Bridge was opened, or how many years ago has the last time been? It has to be at least a dozen 100 million years ago. Everyone was looking at Tian Qingyue with admiring gazes. This man had created a miracle. Everyone, I will take my leave first. Tian Qingyue laughed loudly. He was also relieved. Though he had powerful self-confidence, the Golden Dragon Bridges were really too hard to stimulate. Now that one had finally approved of him, he finally released the breath he had been holding, and his confidence also multiplied by 100-fold. Only a mere 300-odd people had managed to stimulate a Golden Dragon Bridge in a whole epoch, and among these 300-plus people, even those with the lowest accomplishments had still reached the 5th Heaven Celestial King tier. And he was also going to become one of these 300-plus people. He would be able to become a 5th Heaven Celestial King at the very least. No, the 5th Heaven Celestial King tier was definitely not his finishing line. His target was the 9th Heaven Celestial King tier. Xia Hotong also stood up quickly. Moving the regulations inside his body instantly caused ordinary dragon bridges to light up one after another. When he reached the 8th, it seemed to lag, and the 9th seemed like it would not light up no matter what. Is Xia Hotong unable to stimulate the 9th dragon bridge? If he cannot do so, he will be left behind by Tian Qingyue in future. It cannot be helped. The 9th bridge is too hard to stimulate. This is a deciding barrier, and it is extremely difficult for even top-grade monarch tiers to breach this. Sigh. And just when everyone was lamenting, they saw that the 9th dragon bridge had suddenly lit up. Then, the light of the 9 dragon bridges was extinguished, leaving behind only a single golden dragon bridge that was flickering with light. Heavens, Xia Hotong has also stimulated a golden dragon bridge. 2 ultimate prodigies. Indeed, it is the legend that top-grade prodigies would normally not appear, but if they did, they would come in pairs, or even 3s and 4s. It is absolutely true. However, ultimately, only a single monarch tier would be able to attain the pinnacle, while the others would only become stepping stones. The more top-grade prodigies that appear at the same time, the more astonishing the height the monarch tier that manages to attain the pinnacle can reach. The Great Eastern Celestial King of our Universal Peace Heaven finally became an 8th Heaven Celestial King because there had been 3 competitors that were evenly matched with him. If Yu Huaqing and Zhu Huiyun can both stimulate golden dragon bridges, then it will be 4 monarch tiers contesting for the best. In the future, it is highly possible that another 8th heaven celestial king will appear. Everyone discussed spiritedly, and then turned their expectant gazes on Yu Huaqing and Zhu Huiyun. Now, the pressure was on the two of them. The 2 great monarch tiers walked out at the same time, and began stimulating the dragon bridges. They had not disappointed the expectations of the masses, and 2 golden dragon bridges lit up at the same time. This time, everyone erupted into uproar. After a few 100 billion years, the miracle of 4 golden dragon bridges appearing at the same time had finally reappeared. This meant that another 8th heaven celestial king would appear in the universal peace heaven. The 2 great monarch tiers released a battle cry at the same time, and walked along their respective bridges. Though it was destined that one of the 4 of them would attain the pinnacle, exactly who it would be was only a show in the eyes of others, but for them, it was incredibly important. None of them wanted to go no farther than the 5th heaven celestial king tier. Now that the 4 great monarch tiers had left, everyone's interest dropped. They were no longer interested in just watching, and approached respectively, stimulating their own dragon bridges. Niu is going too. Hu Niu jumped out, going to stimulate the dragon bridges. At first, Ling Han had planned to have everyone drawn into the Black Tower so that they could all move together. However, upon further thought, he felt that every person would have their own individual fortune. If he safeguarded everyone by his side, they would be indeed safe, yet it would also cause them to lose the fortune that they should have had. With this thought, he no longer advised them against moving alone. 1, 2, 3, the dragon bridges lit up one after another, and very soon, the number reached as many as 8. In Ling Han's eyes, this could not be more ordinary, and this was definitely not Hu Niu's finishing line. She was the sole direct heiress of the Rock Palace, and was one that had obtained the brand of martial intent from a 9th heaven celestial king at that, so how could she be inferior to Tian Qingyue, Xia Hotong, and the rest of them? However, this caused huge waves of commotion among the masses. What? Someone actually stimulated 8 dragon bridges. Which monarch tier is this? Don't know. It's a young girl, and she is outrageously beautiful. Everyone was watching Hu Niu, and they were all conquered by her pure exquisiteness. At the same time, they were also stunned by Hu Niu's strength. She was able to stimulate 8 dragon bridges. This was something that only a monarch tier could do, and it had to be a super monarch tier at that. Wang, only after a slight pause, the 9th golden bridge lit up, and then all 9 bridges dimmed. In their place, a golden dragon bridge lit up. Heavens! Everyone was holding their heads in shock, their mouths wide open in shock, but they could not utter a single word. The 5th golden dragon bridge had lit up. This was a new record in history. Before this, only 4 super monarch tiers had appeared at most, unlocking 4 golden dragon bridges. A contest between 5 monarchs. In the end, would a 9th heaven celestial king emerge from them? Ling Han, Niu's going first. Hu Niu turned around and waved back at Ling Han. Then, she took out a chicken drumstick, which she chewed on as she walked forwards. Compared to Tian Qingyue and the others previously, she looked so relaxed as if she was here on vacation. Ling Han nodded with a smile, and then he heard the Empress declare, "I'm going." Chapter 2046, The Golden Dragon Bridge lights up again. The Empress stepped out. Her purple long skirt stuck close to her figure as it fluttered in the slight breeze, putting the perfect outline of her figure on full display. Involuntarily, this made a great many people feel carefree and relaxed, unable to remove their eyes from her. Wang, wang, wang. The dragon bridges lit up one after another, and in an instant, their number exceeded 5. This is at least an emperor tier. Hee, when I go to choose my dragon bridge later, if I can walk the same path as her, I will definitely court this exquisite beauty. You had best save the effort. You are not even a king tier, so what right do you have to court her? Is an emperor tier definitely strong? My cultivation level is peak stage heaven soul, and the majority of emperor tiers would not be my match. The empress's exquisiteness had caused a massive commotion. Though Hunyo's beauty was not inferior to hers, the empress's grace and bearing were as unique as a rare gem. Wang, the 6th and the 7th dragon bridge lit up in quick succession. Now, the noise of chatter from the masses instantly silenced. 7 dragon bridges lighting up meant that this exquisite beauty was a monarch tier. Any place that could nurture a monarch tier had to be of the celestial king tier, and that had to be a high-level celestial king tier at that. How could the descendant that had walked out from this kind of force be slighted? In quick succession, the 8th dragon bridge lit up. The crowds exploded in uproar. 8 dragon bridges lighting up at the same time, what did that signify? She could possibly attempt 9 bridges, and then would be able to stimulate a golden dragon bridge. Heavens, could it be that a 6th supreme monarch tier was going to appear? For monarch tiers appearing at the same time meant that it was possible an 8th heaven celestial king would emerge. Then, if this was the situation, did it mean that a 9th heaven celestial king was going to appear now? 9th heaven celestial king, the strongest in the world. Everyone inhaled sharply at the same time, stunned to the point of speechlessness. The 100 Dragons tournament battles this time round would definitely be the start of a new era. Wang, true enough, the 9th dragon bridge lit up. Suddenly, the 9 dragon bridges all dimmed, and a golden dragon bridge lit up. Heavens, what have I seen? Another prodigy that can stimulate a golden dragon bridge. What kind of prosperous age of cultivation is going to begin here? No, no, no. We have never seen these 2 women before. They must not be from our universal peace heaven. If monarch tiers were gathered from all the heavenly realms, it would be very normal for 6 super monarch tiers to appear. But however you put it, for 6 monarch tiers to appear at the same time, it is possible that a 9th heaven celestial king will emerge from among them. 9th heaven celestial king. 9th heaven celestial king. 9th heaven celestial king. Finally, the only words that were left being murmured by the mouths of the masses were 9th heaven celestial king. In the eyes of ordinary celestials, 9th heaven celestial king was an existence that stood at the pinnacle of the celestial path, on the same level as the heavens, supreme and noble. And they had personally witnessed the rise of a future ruler. This naturally caused them to feel their heads numb and feel extremely excited. Who would it be? Tian Qingyue? Xia Hotong? Zhu Huiyun? That little girl munching on a chicken drumstick? When they thought of Hunyo, the masses all shook their heads repeatedly. As they saw it, a 9th heaven celestial king had to be incredibly austere. What 9th heaven celestial king would be munching on a chicken drumstick, and act so casual? The empress smiled dazzlingly at Ling Han, and then stepped onto her bridge. She was never a delicate flower that needed to depend on the protection of another, but rather the all-powerful great empress. Ling Han mused ruefully in his heart. If you loved someone, you should not protect her completely, but had to give her space, and allow her to fly as she willed. Bewitching Maiden Ro also stepped out. With a sway of her slender waist, she arrived at the edge of the cliff. That alluring grace instantly caused a few people to feel like their eyes were going to pop out. How could there be such a devastatingly seductive woman? Bewitching Maiden Ro stretched out her slender hand. She was clearly channeling her cultivation technique, yet it seemed like she was dancing elegantly. Suddenly, one after another, dragon bridges lit up, responding to her power of regulation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A total of 6 bridges. This meant that not only was Bewitching Maiden Ro an emperor tier, she could also be ranked in the upper echelons of emperor tiers, and was just a hair's breadth away from advancing into the ranks of monarch tier. Unfortunately, monarch tiers had to be at the 5th severance, and this was something that she could never accomplish in this lifetime. Unless she severed her own cultivation level, and started back from the very beginning again, but exactly how many people would possess such determination? Bewitching Maiden Ro also smiled beautifully, and stepped onto the bridge. Let me. Let me. Let me. After bewitching Maiden Row, countless people shoved one another in their efforts to stimulate the dragon bridges. They all dreamed of being able to pick the same dragon bridge as bewitching Maiden Row. In that way, they might perhaps have a chance of getting close to her. Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. The commotion that bewitching Maiden Row had given rise to would actually be even larger than that made by the Empress and Hunyo. Upon further thought, this was also normal. Though the Empress and Hunyo were more beautiful, one was incredibly dignified, while the other was pure. If one were to talk about the matter of seducing men, it was definitely bewitching Maiden Row's allure that was superior. A bewitching maiden was a bewitching maiden after all. Ling Han naturally would not allow the heavenly phoenix divine maiden to take risks. She had not even advanced into the severing mundane tier. If she was to meet with any villains on the Dragon Bridge, she really would not have the slightest bit of ability to save herself. It was naturally the same for Shirley and Shiryu. They were too weak, so they had best just obediently stay inside the Black Tower. Countless people were attempting to stimulate the dragon bridges. Actually, as long as they were cultivators, and had reached the severing mundane tier in cultivation level, they would definitely be able to stimulate the dragon bridges. The only difference lay in the number. The majority could only stimulate a single one. After all, whether they were king tiers, emperor tiers, or monarch tiers, they belonged to the extremely limited category of people. Ling Han did not wait longer either. After bewitching Maiden Row, he also began to stimulate the dragon bridges. However, what regulations should he use? Ling Han was slightly hesitant. Merely in terms of source powers of heaven and earth, he had 4 of them in his body, and added with the 3 types of power of regulation bestowed on him by the Black Tower, this number had reached as many as 7. Additionally, he himself also had a grasp of the regulation of slaughter, space, and time, and added together, this had broken the limit of 10. Even if it was in terms of his own grasp of the regulation of slaughter, space, and time, they were extremely powerful, though they could not be compared with the source powers of heaven and earth. Then, he would just try them one by one. The first one was fire. The first source power of heaven and earth that Ling Han had obtained was the 9 Heavens Flame, and thus he first stimulated the 9 Heavens Flame. The 9 Heavens Flame divided soul appeared. Boom, his whole body was burning fiercely, stimulating the dragon bridges. Wang, wang, wang. Suddenly, the dragon bridges lit up one after another. 5, 7, 8. This kind of great commotion was extremely astonishing, immediately drawing the eyes of a great many people. Then, they were all shocked silly. Another prodigy that could stimulate 8 bridges. Would he be able to stimulate another? It should not be possible. 6 supreme monarch tiers have already appeared just now, so it is impossible that another one would appear, right? The majority thought so. 7 super monarch tiers, just the thought of that made them numb. Wang. Right at this moment, the 9th dragon bridge lit up, and then just like previously, all the dragon bridges dimmed. Then, a golden dragon bridge exuded majestic light, as if a golden dragon was about to leap out of it. Heavens! The golden dragon bridge has lit up again. It's the 7th one by now. This has broken all records in history, right? Everyone exclaimed in shock, and then they all became numb. Now, if there was an 8th person that could stimulate the golden dragon bridge, they would already be capable of accepting it peacefully. Really, they could not be any more surprised than this. Their nerves were already tough enough. If they knew that Ling Han had stimulated the golden dragon bridge with only a divided soul, they would definitely drop onto their knees in shock. However, Ling Han did not take a step. Chapter 2047, Most Venerable Divine Path. This was just a single source power of heaven and earth. Again. Ling Han activated the Xianin source water, and a supreme aura suddenly flowed out of his body, instantly causing 7 dragon bridges to light up at the same time and resonate. Fuck. You must be kidding me. This is absolutely not real. Previously, they had all thought that they would not drop their jaws again in shock. Heavens, what had they seen? This man had stimulated more than 9 dragon bridges. How was this possible? 9 was the ultimate figure of the heaven and earth, and throughout history, no matter how stunningly prodigious you were, the highest accomplishment that could ever be attained would only be stimulating 9 dragon bridges, which would ultimately turn into a single golden dragon bridge. And as for Ling Han's case? 16. Inconceivable, this was practically a freak. However, this was far from the end. Wang, another 2 ordinary dragon bridges lit up, and the second golden dragon bridge was seen to light up. Heavens! Gods! A considerable number of people rubbed their eyes, but the scene in front of their eyes did not change in the slightest. It was still 2 golden dragon bridges that were flickering with light. Previously, a similar scene had also happened before, and that was when Yuhuaqing and Zhu Huiyun stimulated the dragon bridges at the same time, which led to 2 golden dragon bridges shining brilliantly at the same time. But that had only been accomplished by 2 super monarch tiers working together. And now, only one person had stimulated 2 golden dragon bridges, which had truly made history. Could it be that we are really going into a brilliantly prosperous age of cultivation? However, was this the end? No way. Ling Han then activated the fiery flame lightning strike wood, and dragon bridges were lighting up rapidly again. Everyone's mouth was wide open. This time, they could not make the slightest bit of sound anymore. Could it be that Ling Han still wanted to stimulate a 3rd golden dragon bridge? Wang. 7 ordinary dragon bridges lit up quickly, resonating with Ling Han. Then, the 8th one also lit up, and then it was the 9th one. The 3rd golden dragon bridge had lit up, as if it was welcoming Ling Han with opened arms. 3 bridges. There were gradually still people coming in, and they were immediately stunned into a daze the moment they entered. This had to be an illusion, it had to be. Ling Han smiled slightly, and activated the firm essence green gold. Instantly, new ordinary dragon bridges lit up again, and then the 4th golden dragon bridge also lit up. Freak, I have seen a freak. I must still be dreaming. Because the 100 Dragons mystery realm is about to open, I became too excited, and started dreaming. Who exactly is this freak? He stimulated 4 golden dragon bridges all by himself. That's right. Who is he? Very quickly, everyone came back to the same question: who exactly was Ling Han? What kind of force managed to nurture this kind of freak that would practically make even supreme monarch tiers blush with shame? Ling Han was not in the mood to care about these people. His eyes were focused on that black dragon bridge. He was going to stimulate this dragon bridge. Since 9 ordinary dragon bridges could stimulate a golden dragon bridge, then would 9 golden dragon bridges be able to stimulate this black dragon bridge? Ling Han thought that this was feasible. 9 nines returned to 1, and that was the Most Venerable Divine Path. Thus, the present problem was whether he would be able to stimulate 9 golden dragon bridges. Again. He activated the power of the Black Tower. It was inside his body in the first place, so it could also be considered a part of his body. This naturally was a cheat, but what Ling Han was betting on was the high grade of the Black Tower. It was a heavenly venerable tier weapon, and in a certain aspect, it had even surpassed this heaven and earth. It should allow him to cheat. Wang. Multiple dragon bridges lit up. Ling Han was delighted. As expected. Thus, another 3 golden dragon bridges practically lit up at the exact same time. Everyone was speechless by now. They really did not know what words they could use to describe the feelings they were currently feeling. Previously, 6 great monarch tiers had only stimulated 6 golden dragon bridges, and this had already created history, but as for Ling Han? All by himself, he had stimulated 7 golden dragon bridges. Didn't that mean that he alone surpassed the 6 great monarch tiers? If there was ultimately one person from the 6 great monarch tiers that could become a 9th heaven celestial king, then what kind of celestial king would Ling Han become? 10th heaven? Sorry, there was no such thing as a 10th heaven celestial king in this world. Everyone was shocked to the point of speechlessness, but Ling Han was not the slightest bit conceited, because the Black Dragon Bridge had not lit up still. Again. He activated the 3 regulations of slaughter, space, and time, continuing to stimulate the dragon bridges. Wang, wang, wang. Indeed, there was no conflict with the Black Tower, and again dragon bridges lit up. The awesomeness of the Black Tower was evident from this. When it expressed its might, the 100 Dragons Mystery Realms saw it and Ling Han as one and the same, but when Ling Han similarly showed 3 types of power of regulation at the same time, the Black Tower could be clearly separated from Ling Han again. Otherwise, how could the power of regulation that Ling Han had grasped compare to the Black Tower? In comparison, it was natural that the stronger one would be taken, and Ling Han's own power of regulation was ignored. But now, the dragon bridges were still continuing to light up, and the number was endlessly increasing. 9. 15. This number had long since surpassed 9, but no new golden dragon bridge lit up. Ling Han understood. This was because he had used 3 types of regulations, and possibly was the equation of 5 plus 5 plus 5, gathering 9 which returned to 1. Thus, not one golden dragon bridge had lit up still. 16, 17, 18. When 18 ordinary dragon bridges lit up at the same time, all the dragon bridges shook, and then they all returned to dead silence. Not just the ordinary dragon bridges had dimmed, but even those 7 golden dragon bridges had lost their brilliance. What was going on? Everyone felt confused. What was the situation now? Ling Han was also slightly surprised. Could it be that his cheating had been discovered, so all his previous results were now confiscated? But right at this moment, 9 golden dragon bridges lit up at the same time. Heavens, 9 golden bridges lighting up at the same time, a magnificent feat that has no precedent. Inconceivable, unbelievable. This is going to be heaven-defying. Could it be? Quite a number of people was suddenly stunned as they turned to look towards that black dragon bridge with wide eyes. The Most Venerable Divine Path, a dragon bridge that had never been stimulated before. Was it possible? Was it possible? The 9 golden dragon bridges flickered for a while, and then once again, they all dimmed. Hong, long, long, a large quake erupted in the entire mystery realm. Multiple images of immortal dragons appeared in the skies, chasing one another, and entwining around each other. Auspicious red clouds filled the skies, as if some extraordinary existence was about to be birthed. Images of auspiciousness appears from nowhere. This means. The truly shocking scene is about to appear. Look! Boom, an indescribable aura surged out, causing everyone's eyes to darken. Pa, they all collapsed on the ground. At least 90% of them had passed out completely, and the remaining 10% found getting back to their feet extremely difficult, so they could only rest on their knees, feeling their legs tremble. They felt like they were facing the world's strongest dragon indeed, the ancestor dragon, also known as the source dragon, which was the ultimate, strongest existence from the first batch of living beings that had been born when the world had first come into existence. In front of this kind of being, they could only grovel. What right did they have to sit as an equal in its presence? In front of the stunned, excited, expectant eyes of these people, the black dragon bridge lit up slowly, as if an ancient dragon had suddenly come back to life. A boundless aura rippled out, shaking the 9 underworlds, and enshrouding the 9 heavens. The Most Venerable Divine Path had been stimulated. Wang, an extremely imposing and overbearing aura surged over, and those that had previously fallen unconscious gradually regained consciousness. They would never forget this scene today. A young man in black robes walked elegantly forwards, and stepped onto the black-colored dragon bridge, leaving behind the view of his back that they could only admire from afar. Chapter 2048, Wuming arrives. the Most Venerable Divine Path reappears. It was only when Ling Han's figure had disappeared from the Black Dragon Bridge for a very long time that everyone finally came back to their senses. Heavens, what had they just seen? Someone managed to stimulate the Black Dragon Bridge, the Black Dragon Bridge that represented the Most Venerable Divine Path. This time, exactly what kind of super elite would be born in the future? An overlord of ninth heaven celestial kings, a supreme monarch? Who exactly is he? Definitely not someone from the universal peace heaven. Don't know. I have never seen him before. Everyone was exclaiming in shock as they held their head. Even if they did not get any rewards at all this time, merely the scene they had witnessed today was enough for them to boast about for a whole lifetime. To be able to personally witness the birth of a monarch among ninth heaven celestial kings, that was an ultimate honor. And there were still a great many people that were still continuously entering. Brother Su, you were one step too late, and you will definitely regret it for your whole life. Lord Lu, you have finally arrived. I witnessed a scene just now that I will never forget for eternity. Ping Ping, I will take that person as my role model, and become a great hero that the whole world will admire. Those that had newly entered naturally would not believe this, but they were no match for different people speaking about the same thing in unison. Though they were still skeptical about this, they no longer said that it was impossible with such certainty. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, the time passed very quickly. A great many people had already set out on their own paths, and there were only a limited few chatterers that were still on the cliff. Whenever they saw someone new come in, they would boast of the glorious scene that they had witnessed, as if they themselves were Ling Han. Wang, a figure entered, looking very plain and ordinary, as if he was someone who could not be more average. This was a white-robed young man, holding a small bow in his hands as if it was a toy. If Ling Han had been here, his eyes would have definitely narrowed. This was no ordinary person. Ji Wuming. He had actually come to the Western Celestial Realm as well. Ji Wuming crossed his arms behind his back, a sliver of a smile wavering at his lips as he thought, during that battle, the dragon tribe was almost completely eliminated, with more than 100 divine dragons dying. To ensure that these divine dragons had not died for nothing, the ancestor dragon buried these dragon skeletons here so that they would resonate with the heaven and earth. The power boost of 100 dragons will have quite a good effect even on me as it can temper and stabilize my physique. After all, I have swallowed too many different kinds of physiques, and over long periods of accumulation, it would definitely become a problem. The might of the dragon tribe is the most domineering, and using the power of 100 dragons to temper my body will be able to solve a problem for me. Additionally, the ancestor dragon's fourth son, Pu Lao, is also among those 100 dragons, and he has also reached ninth heaven. Though this little dragon is a little weak, he is still a ninth heaven existence, after all. The regulations of the 100 dragons interweaving together will lead to blooms of great Tao flourishing, which will also be quite beneficial for me. I will take them, then. Ji Wuming stood unmoving as he stretched out his right hand, his fingers moving lightly. At the same time, Zhang Yun is here. He is a monarch tier from the firm city heaven, and it is said that he can be ranked in the top 5. However, the firm city heaven cannot compare with our universal peace heaven. Zhang Yun can be ranked in the top 5 in the firm city heaven, but he may not be able to squeeze his way into the top 20 here. No matter what, a monarch tier is still a monarch tier, after all. He cannot be insulted lightly, or looked down on. Among the spirited discussions of the masses, Zhang Yun stepped out and began to stimulate the dragon bridges. 1, 2, 3, and very quickly, 8 dragon bridges were lit. As expected, a prodigy that is ranked in the top 5 of the firm city heaven is still extremely strong. Being able to stimulate 8 dragon bridges, that is considerably amazing. He can be ranked in the upper ranks even among monarch tiers. It's unfortunate that he didn't manage to stimulate the 9th dragon bridge, or he would have been able to step onto a golden dragon bridge. Everyone was looking at Zhang Yun enviously. Though this accomplishment would not be so astonishing if this had happened a few days ago, those that had previously witnessed a miracle happen had already stepped onto their own dragon bridges, so the people here were already stunned when they saw 8 dragon bridges shining simultaneously. Zhang Yun was also pleased with himself. Though he had heard that a total of 6 people had stepped on golden dragon bridges when he came in, and 1 person had even stepped on the Most Venerable Divine Path, would he believe such nonsense? Looking at history, even in the most prosperous age of cultivation, only 4 people had simultaneously stepped on the golden dragon bridges, and now they were actually saying that there were 6. What was even more exaggerated was that someone actually stepped onto the Most Venerable Divine Path. Wasn't this completely lying through their teeth? Who would believe it? Just at this moment, wang, 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 several dozen dragon bridges lit up at the same time. It was too glorious. When anyone stimulated the dragon bridges, it would be them lighting up one by one, but now several dozen dragon bridges were lighting up at the same time, and the sight was enough to make their scalps go numb. This scene caused everyone to watch with wide eyes. A completely dead silence had fallen on the area, and you could hear a pin drop. 30, 40, 50, 60. Everyone there could only watch in utter shock, and even Zhang Yun's mouth was twitching as he turned to look at that white-robed young man next to him. 70, 80, 81. Boom, all the dragon bridges lost their brilliance, and at the same time 9 golden dragon bridges shone in quick succession. This time, everyone was naturally even more astonished. 9 golden dragon bridges had lit up at the same time, and this meant the Most Venerable Divine Path was going to unlock. Wuming smiled faintly as his fingers flicked casually, appearing to be incredibly relaxed. If Ling Han had been here, he would have had to admit that he was impressed by Wuming as well. He had borrowed the power of the Black Tower, using a cheating method to be able to stimulate the 9 golden dragon bridges, but Wuming was depending completely on his own abilities. Of course, it could also be said that Wuming was the greatest cheat. With the strength of a 9th heaven celestial king, he had cultivated the body of this lifetime again, so weren't various types of regulations reachable to him with just a casual move of his hand? Only a short while later, the 9 golden dragon bridges dimmed, and the black dragon bridge shone. A supreme aura surged out, capable of suppressing for all eternity. Everyone was sprawled out by the pressure of this aura, and even Zhang Yun was no exception. So what if he was a monarch tier? In front of a celestial king tier level aura, even he could only bow his head in submission. Yet Wuming was still standing with his arms crossed behind him, not taking this aura to heart at all. In fact, there was even a slightly disdainful expression on his face. Though they were similarly 9th heaven celestial kings, just like there was a difference between king tiers and monarch tiers, Pu Lao might not have been able to withstand 100 moves from him years ago, and now he would not feel any reverence towards this kind of aura even after he had reincarnated and was cultivating from the start again. The Most Venerable Divine Path appeared. Zhang Yun was green-eyed with envy. Though he was also a monarch tier, compared with Wuming, who knew just how inferior he was in terms of aptitude, one could stimulate 9 golden dragon bridges, while the other could not even stimulate one. How were they supposed to compare? He glared at Wuming, suddenly revealing an ominous glint in his eyes. This young man was merely at Yang's soul tier, while he was at heaven's soul. There was a very, very wide gap between the two of them. Though he could not match the former in talent, they were both major tiers, and there was a gap of 3 minor levels between them, so how could it be that he could not match the former? He would kill him, eradicate this prodigy that he could only look up to. Pooh! He had not even finished the thought when he saw Wuming had already shot out a punch, which forcefully crashed into his face. Why did the other dare to make a move on him? How was it that he managed to succeed? Why was it that he actually was completely incapable of reacting? Zhang Yun's body collapsed with a bang, and brought endless questions with him to the end of his life. A grand monarch tier, and he had actually been insta-killed by someone who was inferior to him by 3 minor levels. This was practically inconceivable, and there was no way he could believe this. Yet Wuming did not take it to heart at all. In the past, the number of 9th heaven celestial kings he had killed could not even be counted on 2 hands, and which one of them was not 100 times more stunningly and unprecedentedly talented than Zhang Yun? Was there any need for him to take it to heart? He strode forwards, and stepped on the black dragon bridge. Chapter 2049, Bloom of Tao. Ling Han naturally knew nothing of what happened afterwards. He was walking on this black dragon bridge. Previously, he had still been able to see the over 2,000 dragon bridges that were parallel to him, but as he continued walking, the other dragon bridges slowly disappeared, and in the end, only this black dragon bridge that was left behind became wider and wider. Was this still a bridge? It was practically a plain. However, Ling Han had already walked for 3 days, and it was still completely deserted on the dragon bridge. There was only a black path, and no other color could be seen. This black path had been paved with dragon scales, so he felt an uneven texture when he stepped on it. It was useless even if he used regulations to protect himself. It was still very prickly to walk on because this was the power of regulation. Thankfully, it was only very prickly, but did not cause any wounds. Otherwise, it would really become a problem. Wang, an aura suddenly rose up from the bridge ahead of him, turning into a green-colored dragon. With a gust of wind, it fluttered as if it was going to be blown away by the wind at any moment. However, when Ling Han walked over, the green dragon manifested, and the dragon form turned into a human figure wearing green robes. That was an elegant youth. What was this? Ling Han had not even finished the thought when he saw this youth had aggressively launched an attack towards him. He shot out a punch, and wang, seals glowed one after another. They formed on the surface of his fist as it crashed down on Ling Han. It was clearly just a very simple punch, but it had a supreme domineering air that seemed capable of piercing the heaven and earth. Ling Han humphed, and his right hand balled into a fist as well, greeting the blow coming from the green-robed youth. Pung! The two fists crashed into one another, and Ling Han was instantly sent flying back like an artillery shell. In terms of battle prowess, there was actually a wide gulf of many folds between him and this green-robed youth, so he could not even withstand a single punch from the latter. The green robe did not quit while he had an advantage. With a step of his foot, he charged off in pursuit of Ling Han. Pung, pung, pung. He waved his fists repeatedly, raining down a mad barrage of attacks that poured on Ling Han. Ling Han had become a human punching bag, being attacked endlessly, and his body trembled wildly. However, while the green-robed youth's battle prowess was terrifying, it had not reached the extent that it could penetrate Ling Han's physique. No matter how hard he pummeled Ling Han's face had only paled slightly. Have you had enough? Ling Han roared. Though he was not wounded, he still could not accept being pummeled so submissively by someone. Boom! A terrifying light exploded from within his body, surging out in all directions. Great clash of source powers. Boom! The figure of the green-robed youth immediately twisted, and then was ripped apart, turning into pieces due to the impact of this light. Ling Han panted, not because he had used the great clash of source powers, but rather because the continuous barrage of attacks from the green-robed youth had caused his blood to flow faster, so he was slightly out of breath. If anyone found out about this, they would definitely go crazy. It should be known that this green-robed youth was an Earth Soul-level monarch tier, and his battle prowess had even surpassed ordinary heaven souls, but when the attacks landed on Ling Han, they were unable to cause even the slightest injury, and instead he had directly died with a counter-blow from Ling Han. The great clash of source powers will be my strongest ultimate move in future. Ling Han broke into a smile. The explosive power of the divine fetus of fire was also very powerful, but it would extract all his power completely, and was far from as useful as this move. Huh! An expression of shock appeared on his face. The green-robed youth was not a solid entity, but, as it turned out, it had been formed from a streak of dragon's breath. Now that he had shattered, he had turned back into dragon's breath, which was wafting around him. A sliver touched Ling Han's body, and was absorbed by him, and he immediately felt like he had gotten a shot of adrenaline, his spirit re-energized. This was a very nutritious substance. Ling Han immediately became alert. He took the initiative to open up the pores on his body, and the dragon's breath immediately entered continuously into his body, nourishing and invigorating him greatly. The dragon was the leader of all immortal beasts of the world, and this dragon's breath was the solidification of its essence, so it was shockingly beneficial. This black dragon bridge had never been unlocked before, and after so many years, how amazing would the essence contained in the dragon's breath be? Ling Han laughed aloud, and strode forwards. Not too long after, he saw another streak of dragon's breath rise up, turning into a crimson dragon. Then, it elegantly dispersed, and turned into the form of a red-robed woman. With a dragon's roar, the red-robed woman charged over. She clearly looked so delicate, but her figure was incredibly agile. As her claws slashed out, even a great mountain could be easily reduced to dust. Ling Han did not immediately use the great clash of source powers, but rather used other celestial techniques to attack. However, he was really no match for her. After all, he was only at young soul. Even if he was an overlord among monarch tiers, he would still be limited by his cultivation level. At most, he could only battle ordinary heaven souls, but this red-robed woman was an earth soul monarch tier, someone capable of defeating all common heaven souls. Pang, pang, pang. Ling Han had become a punching bag again. No matter what kind of celestial technique he used, it would be easily dealt with by his opponent. If Ling Han really wanted to defeat this opponent, he actually had a considerable number of options. Firstly, the great clash of source powers, second, the explosion of the divine fetus of fire, and third, the Black Tower exercising its might. As long as time was stopped, he would immediately be able to kill his opponent. However, aside from the great clash of source powers, the other two methods could only be used once in a short period of time. After he had obtained a clear understanding of his own strength and the strength of his opponent, Ling Han did not waste any more time. Boom, a terrifying force burst out of his body, surging outwards in all directions. Suddenly, the red-robed woman was shattered into bits, and turned back into dragon's breath. Ling Han absorbed this streak of dragon's breath, and his cultivation level improved a slight bit further. If I can absorb about 100 streaks, I should be just about able to reach the peak stage of Yang Soul. Moreover, dragon's breath can improve my body in all aspects, not just the cultivation level, but even brute power will be greatly increased. The indestructible heaven scroll he cultivated had only increased the toughness of his physique, but when the dragon's breath entered his body, it was as if he had been bestowed the powerful might of a divine dragon, and he could easily strike down the stars in the skies with a light punch. Of course, this was only his misconception. Only a celestial king would be able to accomplish that. After Ling Han absorbed this dragon's breath, he continued forwards. He had not walked too far when he suddenly spotted a flower ahead. Though this looked like a plain, it was actually a bridge, and the path had been paved out with dragon scales. Could flowers actually bloom on this? Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised, and sped up as he walked towards it. This really was a flower, one as tall as 3 feet. There were only 9 leaves, and the flower was as transparent as crystal, possessing an ethereal air that could not be described with words. Ling Han did not recognize this thing. It was definitely not recorded in all the rare books of celestial medicines and spiritual herbs that he knew of, but he could sense great Tao vibrating within, causing his heartbeat to quicken, and he felt an impulse to go nearer and pluck it. This is the bloom of Tao. Small Tower's voice suddenly rang out. No longer pretending to be mute? Ling Han asked with a smile. Ever since he began studying the great clash of source powers, Small Tower had fallen out with him, and did not speak to him at all. And now it actually took the initiative to speak up, which was really an extremely strange thing. Small Tower humphed, and said, "The bloom of Tao contains millions and millions of great Tao. It is not a celestial medicine, but is superior to any celestial medicine. Only when a great number of celestial kings have been buried together could it be birthed." Ling Han gave an "oh." Looks like the legend is not false. There are indeed more than 100 immortal dragons buried here. Try as much as possible to retrieve the bloom of Tao. It is extremely helpful for your path of cultivation, Small Tower said seriously. Chapter 2050, Retrieval. There was no need for Small Tower to tell him. Ling Han had no plans on missing out on this bloom of Tao, and judging by Small Tower's tone, it seemed like there was not just one bloom of Tao. He walked towards the bloom of Tao, and the flower swayed lightly, as if it was going to disappear into thin air. When Ling Han had come close enough, and stretched out his hand to pluck it, a breeze passed, and this celestial flower suddenly turned into uncountable pieces that shot out in all directions, and were gone in an instant. What's going on? The bloom of Tao contains a great many celestial king tier level regulations. By itself, it is in an incredibly fragile state of balance. Thus, when it encounters the slightest external stimulus, it will shatter, Small Tower explained slowly. You clearly knew, yet did not remind me at all. You clearly did it on purpose. Ling Han pointed out. Small Tower did not say anything, and this was considered tacit admission. As expected of the proud tower, proud and petty. Hadn't he just teased it a bit? And it had immediately gotten its payback. Then how am I supposed to retrieve it? Ling Han asked. Try as much as possible to withhold your own aura, and not let loose the slightest bit. Small Tower did not act mute this time. Ling Han sighed, and continued his advance. Half a day later, no bloom of Tao appeared ahead. Instead, there was another streak of dragon's breath that manifested into a formidable man that aggressively attacked him. Could it be that these people were the celestial kings from the dragon tribe? Ling Han cast Great Clash of Source Powers, which instantly killed this opponent, while he himself spat out a mouthful of blood. To be able to instantly kill an opponent that was superior in strength to him with a single move, the time he had to channel the Great Clash of Source Powers would also be slightly longer. This would cause considerable damage to Ling Han himself, so throwing up blood was really very normal. Thankfully, he immediately channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and the organs that had been damaged immediately recovered. Small Tower couldn't help but say, though I do not approve of your reckless actions, if you hadn't come up with this ultimate move, you would have only been able to flee pathetically when you had encountered the spiritual marks left behind by these celestial kings. Which also meant that these opponents were really those celestial kings of the past, but naturally did not even have 100 millionth of their actual strength. Or rather, they had been forcibly limited to the dividing soul tier, or perhaps it depended on the individual. If it was a dividing soul tier they faced, they would be limited to the dividing soul tier, and if it was an immortal palace tier, they would be at the immortal palace tier. Ling Han chuckled and said, therefore, my insistence is very reasonable. However, I still cannot agree. Small Tower's tone was very firm. You do not have to take this kind of risk. In the future, if you can advance into the heavenly venerable tier, you will discover that it is completely meaningless to depend on these external powers. I know. Ling Han nodded. However, without sufficiently powerful strength now, I am no match for Wuming. But Wuming is a reincarnated celestial king, and a 9th heaven celestial king at that. It is very normal that you cannot match him now, Small Tower advised. Ling Han shook his head. He would not be able to match Wuming in the severing mundane tier, nor in dividing soul tier, or immortal palace tier. Even after he advanced into celestial king tier, he would still not be able to. He had to go as far as 9th heaven celestial king tier to be able to truly catch up to him. Just how many years would he have to be suppressed for? He could not wait for so long, nor was he the type to. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he did not want to lose to anyone. Small Tower did not speak anymore. Perhaps it was precisely this kind of character that led to Ling Han's present strength. Without this kind of striving determination to be the best, and to follow the prescribed order, Ling Han's apex would perhaps be limited to only 9th heaven celestial king tier. This was already enough for him to smile proudly down on the entire celestial realm, but to really surpass the norm, he had to become a heavenly venerate. Ling Han continued his advance, and after destroying another few streaks of dragon's breath, a second bloom of Tao finally appeared ahead of him. He cautiously advanced, completely concealing his own aura. However, the bloom of Tao was incredibly sensitive. When he had gotten as close as 9 meters, this bloom of Tao began to tremble, as if it was going to disperse at any moment. Ling Han quickly stopped, and stretched open his right hand. The regulations of space activated, and isolated this part of the heaven and earth. As expected, the bloom of Tao stopped trembling. Ling Han advanced another step forwards, adjusting the regulations of space all the while, and ensuring that he was in a state of emptiness for the whole process. Close, close, close. The bloom of Tao was already close at hand. Ling Han stretched out a hand. The regulations of space wafted. They were clearly visible, yet it also seemed like they did not exist. He had grabbed it. With a thought, Ling Han had stowed the bloom of Tao into the black tower. Done. Ling Han did not manage to check out his harvest, but instead continued his advance. There was no need to immediately refine the bloom of Tao, and he would absolutely stow it in the black tower first. Furthermore, he could still pass it over to be used by the Empress and the others. He continued his way forwards, and destroyed a great many streaks of dragon's breath. At the same time, a great amount of dragon's breath was also tempering his body. His brute power had increased greatly, as if he had truly turned into an immortal dragon himself, capable of moving the heaven and earth with a single movement. Though the giant dragons cultivated regulations, they did not nurture origin power, but rather they would be able to destroy the heavens and earth with a raise of their dragon claws with pure physical power. My physical body is becoming stronger and stronger. In future, I may be able to become a wild beast in human form, capable of destroying the heavens and earth with a single movement. This definitely was just an illusion, unless the dragon's breath he obtained could reach an endless extent. Otherwise, with limited dragon's breath, there was naturally a maximum limit to the power boost he could get. Ling Han suddenly stopped, and he turned around. He had a vague feeling of lingering fear, as if some ultimate enemy was approaching. Only in a short while, a figure appeared from the distance. He seemed to be moving very slowly, but in a few steps, he had already neared considerably. He was dressed all in white, as poised and elegant as a god. It was Wuming. No wonder he would experience a feeling of lingering fear. This was indeed a great enemy, an extremely great enemy. I really had not expected that you, too, would be able to stimulate the Black Dragon Bridge. Wuming seemed slightly surprised. He had been a 9th Heaven Celestial King in his last life, and had stopped at this cultivation level for innumerable epochs. It was possible that he had cultivated all the regulations that could be cultivated at least once, so he had been able to easily stimulate 9 golden dragon bridges, and subsequently gain the approval of the Black Dragon Bridge. But how did Ling Han manage to do so? He was just in the dividing soul tier, yet could actually equal him in the height of regulations? The precious treasure of a heavenly venerable tier is indeed extraordinary, Wuming stated calmly. In the future, though I, too, may be able to step into this cultivation level, there is no harm in me studying it for reference first. Ling Han humphed, and retorted, I fear you won't have that chance. Wuming was not angered, and only slowly said, Young man, do you know how many 9th Heaven Celestial Kings have died in my hands? In the eyes of the world, Celestial Kings were the utmost supreme existence, and 9th Heaven Celestial Kings were the great monarchs among Celestial Kings. Each and every single one of them could rule the ages, and they were truly invincible in the world. However, Wuming was able to kill 9th Heaven Celestial Kings, so just how powerful had he been at the time? Ling Han showed no signs of weakness, and retorted, Why does a real man need to boast about his past achievements? And when I advance into Celestial King, killing 9th Heaven Celestial Kings will definitely be a small matter to me as well. Ha 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 ha. Wuming suddenly burst out into laughter, shaking his head, and said, Do you think just anyone can become a 9th Heaven Celestial King? Those that can advance into this cultivation level would have to be monarchs among monarchs, and all of them would be unprecedentedly talented and genius prodigies. Fine, I won't speak of my past achievements. He stopped his laughter as his eyes became fixed on Ling Han. You should hand over the treasure you possess now. Wuming, I, too, anticipate exchanging blows with you again very much. Ling Han's heroic spirit soared. You? Your only fate will be death. Wuming charged over, a green sword appearing in his hands. An ancient seal was emblazoned on it, and it exuded a supreme might. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.